Chapter 14-16. Woo-woo, Kiki is so good, you're so sensible. I'm so touched, I'm going to cry for a while. Fong Beibei saw that the atmosphere was still depressed because of Poplar Fruit's previous nonsense. She smiled and mischievously rubbed her eyes with her hands. Ah! The kind Kiki did not suspect anything. She came out from her father's arms, opened her slender arms, hugged Fong Beibei, and tried to comfort her. Ma, don't cry, don't be afraid. She was still immersed in Poplar Fruit's lies. Fong Beibei smiled helplessly. She held Kiki's little face, smacked a kiss on her forehead, and said with a smile, "You, how can you be so cute?" Poplar Fruit snickered. He was very touched, but he dared not to admit it. He had to leave a mess for Fong Beibei to clean up for him. Fong Beibei rubbed little Muddle's hair and said, "Okay, you still haven't realized that your father is teasing you." Kiki turned her head blankly and looked at her father. Her father had not had time to restrain the smile on his face. "We're participating in a segment. You see, your father and I are old. In fact, it's all makeup. Touch your mother's hair, it's fake hair." Fong Beibei smiled and pulled Kiki's soft little hand, letting her grab her hair that was obviously shorter. "It's real." Kiki cried out in surprise. She touched Fong Beibei's face and immediately felt that it was different from the skin on her hand. "Where's Papa's?" Kiki turned around and asked her father to lower his head. Then, she curiously touched her own hair and even grabbed 2 handfuls. "Ayo." Poplar Fruit laughed. "This is real, it's just dyed. Papa is bad, you lied to me." The little girl finally came back to her senses. She pouted her little mouth, stomped her feet, and said a little angrily, "Haha, Daddy was wrong, Daddy was wrong." Poplar Fruit also did the same as Fong Beibei. He held his daughter's face, kissed it, and said, "Daddy shouldn't have lied and made Kiki sad. Hee, I forgive you." The little girl was not angry. She was pretending just now, and now she laughed. She laughed happily and felt a little lucky, because her father and mother did not really grow old. The little girl put her little arms around her father's neck and let her father carry her to sit on his lap. Then, she said to her father very intimately, "Papa, why have you all become old, but I haven't?" Fortunately, the injury on young Gua's thigh was on her back. Chichi was also quite heavy, and pressing on the wound was very painful. "Because we want to give you a surprise." Poplar Fruit exaggeratedly opened his arms and said, "Surprise." However, Fong Beibei laughed and decisively exposed him. "There's only surprise, no joy. Kiki, your father is bad." Someone seemed to have forgotten that she also agreed with Poplar Fruit's proposal. "That's right, Papa, you can't lie to a child." The little girl joined her mother in criticizing her father. Poplar Fruit chuckled and changed the topic. "Look at Daddy and Mommy, we've grown old, who's prettier?" "I think Ma is prettier." Kiki twisted her little neck, looked left and right, and giggled. "You're not deliberately saying that because Daddy lied to you, right?" Poplar Fruit asked unconvinced. "No, I'm prettier." "Kiki, come here, give Mommy a kiss." Fong Beibei laughed happily and hugged Kiki, who jumped down from Poplar Fruit's lap, and kissed her again. The 2 girls looked at Poplar Fruit and smiled. Looking at the 2 pairs of smiling eyes, Poplar Fruit could only think of one word: beautiful eyes. Kiki felt that it was not good enough at this time. She ran up, gently pulled her father's hand, shook it, and said softly, "Papa, don't be unhappy. Ma is beautiful, but Papa is not beautiful, but Papa is very handsome. You're really my daughter." Poplar Fruit laughed, rubbed Kiki's little head, and kissed his daughter through his bangs. He was also very happy. Different from other families, Poplar Fruit's family was still a young family. After crying, people looked at them and smiled, which made their hearts warm and sweet. But the recording was not over yet. After simply removing the makeup on their faces, they finally looked normal. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei held hands and went to the hall of the big house where Fong Beibei lived to meet Kiki. Although the makeup was removed, the 2 still looked like an old couple, but they held hands like a young couple, which made people feel very warm. The other families also came here after saying goodbye to the emotional scene. Those who arrived early had already found chairs to sit down. When they saw Poplar Fruit, they stood up in surprise. Yo, Poplar Fruit, you're still here. Haha. Are you better? There's no big problem. Poplar Fruit hugged them one by one and greeted them happily. After recording so many episodes, the 5 fathers had already formed a deep friendship. This scene was very precious, because this was the first time the 5 pairs of fathers and mothers gathered together. But in the end, there was a small segment in this episode's recording, and that was the children bringing water to wash their parents' feet. From TV, this segment, which had been used so many times, could no longer move the audience as much as the original TV commercial, and some extreme viewers even felt that it was fake. But sitting in the armchair, from Poplar Fruit's perspective, it was a completely different feeling. Looking at his daughter holding her small face, swaying as she carried a basin of water, crossing thousands of mountains, thresholds, leaping over thousands of rivers, small ditches, to reach him, then squatting down, using her small fingers to rub his big feet, that kind of happiness accompanied by joy leaped onto his face. Look at him. Fong Beibei covered her mouth and laughed happily. In fact, who wasn't like this? After Kiki helped her father wash his feet, she washed her mother's feet. Fong Beibei also laughed happily, and even hugged Kiki and kissed her without caring that she was wet. Later, an interview with the fathers was added in the show. During the interview with Poplar Fruit, he put his hands together and said with a smile, "Thank you very much for the careful arrangement of the production team. My body can't support a long recording, but I didn't expect the production team to be so generous and help me change the time." And then this segment was really touching. With my wife, Beibei, and my daughter, Kiki, I spent an unforgettable time growing old. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "Really, I'm very grateful. If I missed this segment, I think I'd be very regretful. From this segment, I think we've learned a lot." Poplar Fruit said in the end, "But the most important thing is to cherish the happy time we have now, and cherish the people we love. We can't wait until they're old or gone, and then it's really too late to love them." Chapter 14:17. Poplar Fruit's popularity was unexpected. It was even more popular than Poplar Fruit's popularity in China. This had a lot to do with the way the foreign media reported it. The domestic reports mainly focused on Poplar Fruit's official status, such as the future professor, the youngest department head, double doctorates, and so on. Although these were very impressive, many young people were not interested in them. The foreign reports took a different approach. They dug up and focused on many of Poplar Fruit's heroic deed. For example, like a lone hero, he resisted the violent terrorists at the train station with his own strength, and even defeated them. For example, Yang Guo killed the bank robber with her bare hands. That jumping skill and fighting scene was like a movie, it made people click their tongues. Another example was the kidnapping of Kiki, whose fever had subsided because of Poplar Fruit and Mango TV's low-key handling. Under the investigation of the foreign media, the details gradually came to light. First of all, it was confirmed that Kiki's kidnapping was a revenge incident. The people who kidnapped Chichi were the fugitive criminals from the group of drug dealers who robbed the bank. Secondly, although they were not sure that Poplar Fruit's rescue was an international rescue operation, as the specific location of the rescue operation had been kept secret by Yang Wanxiong to only a few people. However, from the foreign media's investigation of the smoking gang, they gave a guess that was very close to the truth. This guess would not cause an international dispute, but at least it covered Poplar Fruit's rescue operation with a mysterious and exciting color. There were many other examples, such as Poplar Fruit going into the heart of the kidnappers like a lone hero, Poplar Fruit's madness, and after rescuing Kiki, Poplar Fruit was seriously injured, and the bullet was only a short distance away from his heart. These pieces of information, which were not difficult to find, were all dug up by the foreign media. It was as if they were mining. Every time they found a new piece of news, they would be as excited as if they had found gold or diamonds. Countless editors stayed up all night to connect these clues into bizarre stories. China's report downplayed the role of Poplar Fruit, while foreign media's report weakened the existence of the police in solving the case. Instead, it highlighted Poplar Fruit's fatherly love without regard for his own safety. Foreigners liked this kind of personal heroism, and they also liked this kind of tragic love. After this news became popular, hundreds of millions of netizens discussed it on social media. Isn't this a real-life hurricane rescue? Many people exclaimed. 7 years ago, Manason's hurricane rescue was a huge success. In order to rescue his abducted daughter, a retired Secret Service agent charged into the mafia's territory. Manason's care and love for his daughter, as well as his unscrupulous and fearless image of himself, was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. In comparison, wasn't Poplar Fruit's act of rescuing his abducted daughter as revered as Manason's? Everyone knew that Poplar Fruit's skills were extraordinary. Netizens who had watched the videos of Poplar Fruit dealing with the thugs at the train station and bank robbers knew that this young father with a doctorate was an expert in Chinese kung fu. There were even people who took photos of Poplar Fruit's bare upper body from Fashion Week back then. They pointed at Poplar Fruit's strong muscles and exclaimed in admiration, "China's Rambo." However, Poplar Fruit wasn't as lucky as the main character in the movie, nor did he have Rambo's steel body. Poplar Fruit was just an ordinary person. He was also seriously injured, and was almost on the verge of death when he was rescued. However, this made people feel the cruelty of reality and how difficult it was for Poplar Fruit. Fortunately, he managed to pull through. Seeing Poplar Fruit's upright posture during the military parade, everyone was glad that there were still good people in this world who could live a peaceful life. Even though he was seriously injured, Poplar Fruit was still able to recover in more than a month. Of course, there were also many netizens who, because of their admiration for Poplar Fruit, went to watch one of the few shows where Poplar Fruit appeared for a long time. Where Are We Going, Dad? This show unexpectedly became a small hit overseas. However, foreign netizens still paid attention to Poplar Fruit and his daughter. From the show, they truly understood Poplar Fruit's love for Kiki. It was like a spring breeze, sprinkling in every viewer's heart bit by bit. Foreigners also understood love. From TV series such as Modern Family, it could be seen that they preferred this kind of fatherly love, this kind of family relationship. Although some people might think that it was normal and ordinary, when this kind of fatherly love was connected to Poplar Fruit's sacrifice to rescue his daughter, it was enough to make all the viewers sigh. Among ordinary people, Poplar Fruit's influence had reached an amazing height. There were even many foreign netizens who had already regarded Poplar Fruit as their idol. Because of this, there were even some small Hollywood film companies that ran to China, wanting to invite Poplar Fruit to make a movie. When they heard the news, more domestic film companies also flocked in. Of course, Poplar Fruit's popularity played a key role, but the film company actually had a mature consideration. Poplar Fruit's image and temperament were good, and he was also a martial arts master like the two brothers Long. By using his popularity, it was inevitable that they would be able to take root in Hollywood. Moreover, didn't Poplar Fruit participate in a variety show? In everyone's view, even if Poplar Fruit had a university teaching and administrative status, he was still a figure in the entertainment industry. Many Chinese celebrities dreamed of going to Hollywood but did not have the chance. How could Poplar Fruit refuse? However, Poplar Fruit refused. At first, he declined, but later on, Poplar Fruit really did not have the time to deal with the wave of invitations, so he simply hung up the no war sign. Not only did he face the reporters, but he also pinned his unintentional electric shock attitude on Weibo. Finally, the small film companies that wanted to fish in troubled waters were no longer rejected by Poplar Fruit, but the big film companies came running. Even if Poplar Fruit was closed, they could still find Poplar Fruit in school. "I don't make movies," Poplar Fruit said helplessly. "We're not looking for you to make movies." The person from 20th Century Fox was very happy because Poplar Fruit spoke English so well that it was as if he was talking to his own countrymen. There was no language barrier when they communicated. "Then what do you want?" Poplar Fruit asked, puzzled. "We want to buy the adaptation rights of your story." It turned out that Fox, who once released Hurricane Rescue, had taken a fancy to Poplar Fruit's real-life story and wanted to buy it, adapt it into a movie script, and then film it. "We guarantee that tens of millions of people in the world, hundreds of millions of people want to see such a movie. Fatherly love and guns, this is the eternal source material of Hollywood movies," the person said while dancing. "Sorry, excuse me." Poplar Fruit smiled and patted the person's shoulder, but he had no interest in chatting with the person. "Although to you, this is a good source material and a gimmick, to my family, This is a memory that they don't want to mention. Yang didn't even turn back as she left. Chapter 14:18. Amidst the hustle and bustle, Poplar Fruit calmly ushered in his first semester as the dean of the department. Originally, a young boy was riding on top of everyone's heads. Not to mention the Eurasian teachers, the other teachers in the college who had struggled for decades and were still in teaching positions or were only in the position of deputy dean were faintly unconvinced of Poplar Fruit. However, after returning from the military parade, Poplar Fruit had supreme prestige. Even the principal was willing to give him generous treatment. The students below were even more in awe of him. At this time, no one dared to jump out and criticize the college's arrangement for being unfair. After all, Poplar Fruit was a person who had been praised by the number one leader. Who dared to question the number one leader's vision? Of course, putting aside the issue of age, to evaluate Poplar Fruit's ability as an equal, regardless of whether it was a teacher or a student, they all had to bow down to him. In the last teaching seminar before school started, Poplar Fruit faced teachers of 7 different languages at the same time. Whether it was answering questions or asking questions, his ease and knowledge shocked everyone. However, compared to Poplar Fruit's verbal battle with the group of scholars at Shindar Translation, this was only a small scene. The beginning of the new semester was a busy start for Poplar Fruit and the Eurasian teachers. This was because they had to organize an entrance exam, organize the students to fill in their applications, and finally decide on their second foreign language. Of course, second-year students could also join in. After second year, the burden of common subjects was reduced. Some outstanding students who had extra energy could study a third foreign language. This was a big innovation of Higoshiyama University. Students who studied a third foreign language would have strong competitiveness in the future. Whether it was in postgraduate studies, going abroad, or seeking a high-income job in the future, it would be a very conspicuous bonus point. According to Poplar Fruit's recent understanding of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, if a student of Higoshiyama University mastered 3 foreign languages, the possibility of entering the Ministry of Foreign Affairs after graduation was very high. However, learning 3 foreign languages at the same time was a big challenge. One had to know that learning 2 foreign languages could make half of the students feel uncomfortable, and only a quarter of the students could persevere. Learning 3 foreign languages at the same time was not only a matter of time, but it also required the student to have a high level of linguistic talent and interest in learning foreign language. Even in Higoshiyama University, which had most of the outstanding students in the Guangdong and Hunan provinces, Poplar Fruit estimated that there would not be more than 10 students with such ability and aptitude in each batch. As for the Sanskrit and African languages taught by Poplar Fruit himself, it was estimated that there would be even fewer people choosing them. It was unlikely that there would be a single person chosen in a year. Of course, this was also a matter of foundation. Higoshiyama University's traditional strengths were in medicine, economics, and other sciences, literature, history, politics, and social sciences. Language studies could not even be compared to the Guangdong Foreign Studies University in the city. Therefore, Poplar Fruit had to start from the basics with the academy. After a few years, their students would be able to enter the market and earn a reputation in the market. Naturally, more outstanding students would be willing to enroll. Of course, Higoshiyama University had already created a huge signboard like Poplar Fruit. According to an organization's investigation, the number of applicants for Higoshiyama University increased by 2.6% this year. This was equivalent to having tens of thousands of outstanding students. Many of them had changed their view of Higoshiyama University because Poplar Fruit was teaching at Higoshiyama University. This was just like how after lecture room became popular, the number of applicants for Xiamen University skyrocketed. This comparison was not accurate enough. A more similar example was like how the campus bell of a martial arts university became popular on the internet. Many new students applied for martial arts universities just to see the beauty of the cherry blossom goddess. Although this could only affect a small number of people, and the only thing that could make the school competitive in recruiting students was the improvement of their own abilities. However, from this short period of glory, it could be seen how powerful the appeal of a person with considerable influence in society was. However, What really made Chen Zhongdai happy was that this year's postgraduate exams in the Foreign Studies department had also become popular. These newly recruited postgraduate students obviously had higher scores than previous years. They were not like the undergraduates who followed the crowd blindly. The reason why they chose Higoshiyama University and the Foreign Studies department was because of Poplar Fruit's success. It was because the Foreign Studies department had nurtured a local-born and bred talent like Poplar Fruit. Entering Higoshiyama University's Foreign Studies department was, of course, also a desire to replicate Poplar Fruit's success. However, Poplar Fruit's success would not be replicated so easily. This guy's talent was not something a normal human could compare to. Chen Zhongdai had no intention of deceiving the students. However, as the dean and instructor, he did not want to disappoint the students' expectations. Therefore, this year's postgraduate teachers had a heavy responsibility. Chen Zhongdai began to consider whether he should increase Poplar Fruit's burden. There was absolutely no problem with Poplar Fruit's ability. It would not be a problem to let him be a doctoral supervisor at all. It could be said that Poplar Fruit could be used as a revolutionary brick to move wherever there was a need. However, Chen Zhongdai could not do this for the time being. Even the title of a postgraduate supervisor could not be thrown on Poplar Fruit's head. That was because of the lack of qualifications. Next month, the title of Associate Professor of Poplar Fruit would be officially announced. Chen Zhongdai was still looking forward to throwing out the atomic bomb-level thesis of Poplar Fruit after the title was announced. He wanted to help Poplar Fruit get the title of professor next year. Before this, Poplar Fruit could only obediently guide the undergraduates or occasionally help the postgraduate supervisors. He could not rush it. However, this year, the School of Foreign Languages was ambitious. Not only did they invest a lot of effort in the academic construction of the school, but they also had to boldly expand the school's traditional resources. In the first semester, Poplar Fruit prioritized stability and laid a good foundation for the Eurasian language department. However, in the new semester next year, Poplar Fruit would go abroad more often with Chen Zhongdai and the school's people. On one hand, they would participate in international industry conferences and forums to increase the school's voice in related areas. On the other hand, they would also look for resources to cooperate with excellent foreign universities. For example, the school had cooperation with some foreign universities for small languages such as Spanish, French, Korean, Taiwanese, etc. Poplar Fruit would also strive to use his influence and academic ability to help the school build bridges with more excellent schools. Especially for his Eurasian language department, the student still needed to increase communication with native speakers to avoid learning a mute language. Therefore, the junior students and the foreign exchange students practiced speaking and correct pronunciation. The senior students went abroad to improve themselves in a real language environment and personally experience the local conditions and customs of the foreign countries. This way, they would be able to apply what they had learned. When they graduated, they could directly become the core talents of the company or related departments. Poplar Fruit still had a lot to do. Chapter 14-19. Although Poplar Fruit was extremely busy at school, he still managed to squeeze out 3 days to accompany his daughter on her 6th trip to a father's place. The trip this time was at Nanhu, which was also very close to Guangdong province. However, to Liu Yi, it was a trip that touched his soul. 17 years ago, Liu Yi's first movie, which was also the movie that made him famous after being nominated for the Golden Rooster Award for Best Supporting Actor, was filmed in Da Yuan's ancient Miaoville. The production team had chosen this place with great care. Even Liu Yi did not know about it beforehand. He had even forgotten that this place was the old haunt where his dream began 17 years ago. Revisiting the old haunt, there were a lot of sighs, many emotional and touching scenes. Especially when Liu Yi brought his son to live in the house where he used to film under the arrangement of the production team. Liu Yi lay down on the bed while the camera traveled back in time to the past. The feeling of time and space intertwining and no longer existing was touching from the bottom of one's heart. Back then, Liu Yi was still a young man. He was also acting as someone else's son. Now, the mountain was still there and that person was already a father. So, was the main character of this trip Liu Yi? Of course not. The memory was just a small Easter egg. In Da Yuan's ancient Miao village, the production team continued to torture the fathers with all kinds of games and competitions. Of course, Poplar Fruit felt that the most meaningful part of this episode was the role-playing mission on the second day. This role-playing was not referring to the third day where they had to dress up as anime characters and act mysterious. Instead, the children and the fathers had to split up and go deep into different jobs to experience the hardships of working at the bottom of society. Poplar Fruit and Xian Xian had to go to the barbershop to learn how to cut hair by hand from the master. Meanwhile, Kiki followed Da Jun, Lin Yongjian, and Zhu Shimin to the brickyard to move bricks. It was unknown if the master of the barbershop did it on purpose. The tools they used were scissors and scrapers. They did not even have a pusher. Of course, it wasn't very retro. When Poplar Fruit was young in the countryside, he also had such an old master cut his hair. A highly skilled master could cut clean and refreshing hair with a pair of scissors, and it was indeed easier to use a hair clipper than a pair of scissors. Therefore, in the current era where hair salons were everywhere, hair clippers had become the first choice of hair clippers for hairdressing. However, if you went to those high-end hair salons or observed the work of very top hairdressers, it was easy to find that they still used scissors. A pair of delicate scissors was like an extension of their hands and thoughts. The customer's hair also changed into the shape in their mind under the swing of the scissors. Compared to that, the pusher was only a tool used by a small number of people when they needed to push a green head. The master taught Poplar Fruit step by step how to use scissors and comb to cut his hair. Little chubby Xian, on the other hand, experienced the old-fashioned perming method under the service of another master. Originally, Poplar Fruit should also try to curl his hair. In the end, because Poplar Fruit's hair was too short, he was used to having a buzz cut, he escaped the disaster. Using scissors to cut hair was not as easy to learn as Poplar Fruit thought. Even though Yang Guo was already very talented, and his control over his muscles had already reached the level of minute detail, Yang Guo could only awkwardly look at the sacrificing customer in front of him with a pair of scissors in his hand. He had no idea where to start. This was two different things from using a miaodao. A miaodao had its delicate parts, but compared to a small pair of scissors, it was still wide open. The customer's requirements were not high. Just make do with it. Cut it a little shorter. But how should he cut it a little shorter? He couldn't just pick up a strand of hair and cut half of it, right? In the past, when he cut Kiki's hair when she was young, Poplar Fruit directly covered it with a kettle lid and then cut off the bottom edge. But obviously, adult hair could not be done that way. And after the store manager taught so much, Poplar Fruit felt that it was still very difficult to connect the dots. What should he do? So hot, so hot. Xian Xian muttered in a muffled voice. Poplar Fruit turned his head and smiled. Xian Xian's hair had been rolled up by the hairdresser with a small roll of paper, and the granny-like master took out a steamed towel from a big pot and directly covered Xian Xian's small head. The steaming towel emitted a fragrance similar to that of roasted sweet potatoes. Xian Xian was a little restless. He huffed and twisted, and even shouted, I'm roasted." Poplar Fruit looked and couldn't help but laugh. In the end, he was gently tapped on the shoulder by his grandpa master behind him. "Don't look around, do your thing. Don't be afraid, it's not hot." The granny-like master coaxed. Xian Xian, who was slowly getting used to it, did indeed calm down. His small nose was still twitching, as if he wanted to eat after smelling the fragrance. "All right, let's ignore this little foodie for now." Poplar Fruit calmed down and paid attention to the customer in front of him. "Little master, are you reliable?" This middle-aged customer was more interested in variety and happily chatted with Poplar Fruit. "Big brother, don't worry. Today, you'll see how beautifully I tidy you up." Poplar Fruit laughed. He used the Guanxia style of Mandarin that he just learned and said, "My family has a godly haircutting technique that has been passed down for thousands of years. Today, I took it out because I saw that you looked kind. I don't serve ordinary people." Hearing Poplar Fruit's words, everyone laughed. This guy really dared to say that. This was the first time he used a pair of scissors to cut someone's head, right? Even when he was young, he didn't harm the girl in front of him like this. Xiao Han foolishly did this kind of bad thing when he was young. Of course, This was also to add some humor to the program, but when it came to cutting, Poplar Fruit didn't cut people as easily as he did with the Meowdow. Poplar Fruit was seen holding a comb in one hand and scissors in the other. He was trembling as he combed twice, not daring to cut. "Little master, you can do it. I don't blame you." The middle-aged man wanted to comfort Poplar Fruit, but his words sounded funny. Yang Guo gathered her courage, calmed herself down, and began to snip. 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 Needless to say, Yang Guo's cut was quite stylish. After that cut, he gradually regained his confidence, causing the sound of his scissors to become a string. After cutting, the hair fell down one after another, as if it was drizzling. However, the customer gradually felt that there was a problem. He took advantage of a gap to touch the back of his head and asked doubtfully, "Little master, did you cut my hair unevenly?" "Ahem, it's okay, you can continue." "Old Ping, I'll fix it for you later, and it'll be fine," Grandpa's master said calmly as he smoked. Well, Poplar Fruit's confidence in cutting didn't mean that he had broken through some technical bottleneck. He was still far from becoming a hairdresser. Chapter 1420. Mossy stone steps, smoky alleys, Meow Village in the South Lake, and more of the beauty of the small towns in the south. At the corner of the street, 2 feet, one big and one small, appeared in front of the audience. Fut, fut. The audience, who were drinking water, could not help but spit it out. They laughed so hard that their stomachs were cramping. On the screen, the big and small duo appeared. Slippers and shorts, that was nothing. Looking at their upper bodies, they were wearing a colorful short jacket, which gave off a strong local flavor. Poplar Fruit and Xian Xian were wearing special sunglasses. Poplar Fruit was wearing the classic round old man's sunglasses. Their hairstyles were also super cool. Xian Xian's new compact curly hair, Poplar Fruit's side flattened watermelon skin, coupled with their weird outfits, it was as shocking as it could be. Poplar Fruit laughed and leaned back to back with Xian Xian, making a classic pose of holding a gun with one hand in James Bond. This time, the audience, who did not laugh, also laughed. Well, after cooperating with the program team, Poplar Fruit quickly took Xian Xian to get rid of the colorful short jacket. The two of them finished their tasks early and had an early lunch. Of course, Poplar Fruit was not willing to stay and rest. He missed Kiki, who was working in the brickyard, and Xian Xian missed her father. So, the two of them hit it off and decided to go to the brickyard together. Finally, they arrived at the brickyard. Poplar Fruit held Xian Xian's hand and went in. Then, under the dim light, they found their daughter in the crowd. "Kiki." Poplar Fruit's steady voice trembled. It was mainly because of his heartache. She was a beautiful little girl, but now she was wearing a mask, and her face was covered in dirt. How could he not feel heartache? "Dad." Xian Xian did not care. She cheered and rushed to Zhu Shimin, who was still holding a brick in his hand. Wait. My clothes are dirty," Zhu Shimin shouted, but Xian Xian had already jumped on him. "Papa." Kiki raised her head in surprise. Her eyes were as clear and beautiful as ever. Her voice was muffled because she was wearing a mask. The little girl was very excited to meet her father. When her father squatted down, she gave him a big hug. Of course, Poplar Fruit didn't care that his daughter had stained his clothes with brick dust. "We moved a lot. From here to there. It's not comfortable wearing a mask." The little girl was excited when she saw her father. She couldn't stop talking. Poplar Fruit couldn't stop laughing. He looked around and roughly understood the sweat his daughter and the other guests had put in. Zhu Shimin and Lin Yongjian rolled up their sleeves and worked hard to move the bricks. Kiki and Da Jun helped them. They lifted the bricks from the ground and handed them to them. Da Jun was so afraid of getting dirty, but he put in a lot of effort today and didn't mind at all. The electric tractor in front of them was already half loaded. According to Kiki, they had already sent out an entire vehicle. Of course, it was impossible to ask the children to do such a hard work all the time. They were too young, and they were exhausted after moving for a while. Originally, Kiki and Da Jun were brought out to play by the daughter of the owner of the small brick factory. The factory was too small, and he was both the owner and the worker. However, after hearing about the little sister's story, the two children were very sensible and came back with the electric tractor. They helped finish the rest of the work. "Come on, I'll help too." Poplar Fruit rolled up his sleeves and joined the ranks of moving bricks. Poplar Fruit also brought Xian Xian. In this way, there were 3 pairs of father and son. Xian Xian helped his father, and Kiki worked hard to help Poplar Fruit. The little girl was not weak like a girl at all. She worked hard to hand the bricks to her father. The audience applauded for these children. Good job. Finally, with everyone's efforts, the last truck of bricks was sent out by Poplar Fruit. Kiki's task was considered completed. Of course, everyone was not in a hurry to leave. They had a very simple lunch at the little sister's house. This simple was relative to the living standards of the guests. For the owner's daughter, the little sister's family who had been admitted to a university, they had already taken out the best ingredients at home to entertain the guests. And the little sister's cooking. "You don't have to cook anymore." Poplar Fruit stopped the girl who wanted to cook another pot of rice and stir-fry dishes because of Poplar Fruit and Xian Xian's arrival. He smiled and said, "Xian Xian and I have already eaten. Let's sit and chat." Poplar Fruit served Kiki and quickly finished the meal. After the little girl worked hard, her appetite increased and she ate quickly. After eating, she told her father about the little sister's situation. It turned out that although the little sister's father was the owner of a small brick factory, in fact, he earned very little money. After working for half a day, a truck of bricks only earned a few yuan. But the little sister was very optimistic. She smiled and told the children about her deeds. She told the children that because she was admitted to a university, she needed to spend more money. So, during the summer vacation, she helped her father earn money in the brick factory, but her father's burden became heavier. The father would grit his teeth and send his daughter to university no matter how hard it was. Perhaps this was the only way for them to change their lives. Poplar Fruit listened to his daughter's story and looked at the girl with big eyes who loved to smile across the table. Hearing other people pity her, the girl smiled embarrassedly, but her eyes were red. She should be 18 years old this year, right? But the children of the poor began to take charge of the family early. She did not go on a graduation trip, nor did she follow her friends to play. Instead, she began to think about her future and shoulder a heavy burden for her family. Even though the environment was bad, even though she was in a difficult situation, even though she could not afford to buy cosmetics or nice clothes, her eyes were filled with hope. Her face was blooming with love, and her smile was optimistic and warm. "She's the one who's the best." Poplar Fruit had seen many children who were poorer than her, but this was the first time he had seen such an optimistic and cheerful girl from a poor family. Even the super sensible Xiong Xiaolin from the Xiong family village did not have such a smile filled with positive energy like this girl in front of him. Of course, she was not a very beautiful girl. She could not even be considered pretty, but her smile was definitely a radiant one that the audience would never forget. At this moment, the emotional Da Jun had tears in his eyes. He held Lin Yongjian's hand and asked Lin Yongjian to leave the money to the little sister. Kiki obviously thought so too. She said so much because she wanted her father to help the little sister who had touched her. Every child was a kind angel. The audience in front of the TV felt especially deeply at this moment. Hearing the two children's choked voices, the little sister was also moved to tears. But she was crying while smiling. She was not smiling because she was proud, but because she was gratified and moved. She also did not want her tears to affect the efforts of others. However, Poplar Fruit understood that the little sister did not need money. She was already in university, and her family's situation was not so bad that she needed others to help her. What she needed was to know that her efforts were rewarded with the love of others. With this touching and sincere support, he believed that her family would soon see the dawn of hope. Chapter 1421. Cosplay, also known as role-playing, was popular in Japan, the United States, and thousands of young men and women who loved anime, including China. However, Poplar Fruit helplessly discovered that the director of the recent episodes of the show, Where Did Dad Go?, was definitely a middle-aged man. The response to the old man's cosplay from the previous trip was very good, so this time, there was a new and even more exaggerated cosplay. Liu Yi was made into a demonic Guanyin bodhisattva, Hu Jun turned into a bull demon with an iron ring on his nose, Lin Yongjian was a hunchbacked earth eunuch, and Zhu Shimin was even more miserable. He carried a turtle shell and became a green ninja turtle. Under the banner of the show, Poplar Fruit was naturally not spared. He was directly stuffed into a sponge box, and after a series of smears, he became SpongeBob SquarePants. Well, Poplar Fruit actually fooled the smart Kiki with such a clumsy cosplay. Using this opportunity, Poplar Fruit, as a SpongeBob SquarePants, chatted with his daughter a lot. The topics included love and respect for parents, friendship between friends. Seeing that his daughter did not recognize him and completely treated him as her favorite anime character, Poplar Fruit asked a question that he wanted to know very much. Kiki, your papa and mama are married, do you feel unhappy? In order to pretend to be SpongeBob SquarePants, Poplar Fruit even imitated Kiki's tone to speak. This way, Kiki would feel very close and would not be suspicious. I don't think so. Why would I feel unhappy? Chichi asked in confusion. In Kiki's pure mind, the little girl had never considered whether she did not like Fong Beibei as her stepmother. To her, Fong Beibei was both her sister and mama, so there was no problem of a stepmother. But, let me tell you a secret. Kiki pulled on SpongeBob SquarePants' clothes and said, "What secret?" Poplar Fruit was a little frightened at this moment, and even his voice became deep. Every time the little girl wanted to tell him a secret, she would turn into an adorable little girl who would cheat her father. Fortunately, Kiki was excitedly sharing her little secret with SpongeBob SquarePants and didn't notice the problem with Poplar Fruit's voice. That's right. My papa and mama are actually going to have a big wedding. It didn't happen before, so it was changed to next year. Kiki waved her hands and drew a big circle. These words were a little ambiguous and would probably cause controversy after the broadcast. Of course, Poplar Fruit knew what his daughter meant. He had a headache, but he had to explain the secret to the audience. You are talking about a big wedding. Are you talking about a big wedding? Youngwa asked. Yes. The little girl nodded fiercely and said, Sister Shanshan bought me a super beautiful dress, but I couldn't wear it. Kiki felt a little regretful. She gestured to her height and said, Papa said that I grew very fast, and I can't wear the beautiful clothes I bought before. Then wait until next year, I can't wear my dress either. It doesn't matter. You can still buy new ones in the future. The new dress will definitely be more beautiful than the one you have now. Poplar Fruit stretched out his other hand and patted his daughter's shoulder gently to comfort her. In his prop suit, the left hand was the thumb and the right hand was the palm, so it was impossible to make other gestures. I think so too. The little girl had a good attitude. Actually, I think that your papa's wedding didn't happen because of his injury. He probably didn't want to change the time at the last minute, right? He had already prepared so much. Poplar Fruit explained. Yes, my papa was injured. He was so pitiful. He slept in bed for a long time. Kiki held her hands to her heart and said with some lingering fear, but my papa is super powerful. He woke up very quickly. Grandpa Doctor said that papa is a miracle. Poplar Fruit gently stroked his daughter's hair with his palm and said lovingly, Of course, your papa has to recover quickly, because he still has to protect you. The little girl smiled sweetly and was slightly shy. Then are you happy now? Papa's body has recovered, and then he can come out to play with you. Poplar Fruit asked. I'm happy. SpongeBob SquarePants, wait a minute, let's go back together, okay? Kiki was worried that SpongeBob SquarePants would be afraid, so she quickly took his hand and said, Don't be afraid, my papa is a very good person, and you are my good friend, he will definitely like you. It was impossible for them to meet. Poplar Fruit had already become SpongeBob SquarePants, so it was impossible for him to change into himself and meet her. He waved his hand and said, I'm sorry, Kiki, I'm afraid I can't meet your father. I can't stay outside for a long time. Soon, I will have to go back to the sea. In fact, Poplar Fruit was worried that his daughter would cry because she did not want SpongeBob SquarePants to leave. However, Poplar Fruit did not see that Kiki was very sad. She pondered for a moment and nodded her head in realization. The little girl had a deep understanding expression and said, I know, SpongeBob SquarePants, You can't stay on the ground for too long. That way, you will die from lack of water. Yes, yes. That's the reason. Well, Kiki had found a reason for herself, so Poplar Fruit didn't have to worry about it anymore. He said with a smile. This was actually what Kiki had learned from watching cartoons. When SpongeBob SquarePants ran to land, he would indeed dry up and die. Then SpongeBob SquarePants, hurry up and go back. Hurry up and go back. The kind-hearted Chichi became anxious. She quickly stood up and pushed Young Gua's costume. Wait a minute, there's no need to be too anxious. I still have a little time before I have to go back to the sea. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, I have another question to ask you. Okay, ask away. But when it's time, you have to go home obediently. The little girl turned around and lectured her father. Your papa and mama are getting married. If they want to have a child, will you be unhappy? Poplar Fruit had always wanted to ask this question. It just so happened that he could ask it through SpongeBob SquarePants. No. Why would I be unhappy? Kiki had a puzzled expression again. Because many children don't like them to have a second child. Poplar Fruit didn't let go of this question easily this time. He spread out his hands and said, because they think that if Papa and Mama give birth to a second child, Papa and Mama won't like them anymore. Hee, I'm not afraid. You all want to lie to children. The little girl said with a smile, my Papa and Mama won't dislike me. They all love me very much. Yes, you have to believe in this. Poplar Fruit was a little moved, and his voice trembled a little. Yes, there's more. SpongeBob SquarePants, let me tell you. I really want a younger brother or sister. Kiki whispered into SpongeBob SquarePants' ear. After saying that, the little girl giggled. Under the sunlight that broke through the fog in the morning, her smile was so sincere and sweet. Chapter 14:22. In the end, Poplar Fruit did not reveal SpongeBob SquarePants' true identity. Just like how Liu Yi did not reveal that Guanyin Puza was himself, both of them wanted to leave a precious memory for their child. The sixth trip ended with a warm and emotional scene. Poplar Fruit and Kiki returned to Guangzhou and continued working on his Eurasian studies. Of course, Kiki had to continue attending kindergarten and Fong Beibei had to start her postgraduate studies. She was not as free as Poplar Fruit. However, Poplar Fruit had returned with a mission this time. After recording the show, producer Xie and the village chief had given them a mission. That was to invite a celebrity from the entertainment industry to participate in the next trip, which meant that they would be guest. This was a rare favor that the production team had given to the fathers. One had to know that a national-level variety show like Where's Dad Go? Had received so much attention from the audience that it was unknown how many movie and television crews wanted to invite people to participate in the promotion. This was also because the guests on Where's Dad Go were more fixed and there were almost no guests. That was why the production team did not give them any slips. However, every celebrity who could be on Where's Dad Go would receive a lot of attention. For example, last season's Huang Bai and Tong Dowei had gone to New Zealand to participate in the program's recording in order to promote their movie, Darling. Running Man was also a national-level variety show. Not only were there all kinds of guests vying to be on it, the few fixed guests on Running Man had also gained a lot of popularity. They had received so many movie invitations that their hands had gone limp. Of course, the production team did not say that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could be on the show. For the fixed guests to invite guests, the list of people had to be approved by the production team. Speaking of the invited guests, Poplar Fruit immediately thought of one person. Che En-juan. When Poplar Fruit was hospitalized in Beijing, Che En-juan had come to visit him. He had said that he was filming a movie, unexpectedly. A movie that was going to be released on the big screen. Only Poplar Fruit, who did not do anything, did not know about this. The preparation for this movie began in April last year. Later, they finally started production with Han, whom they had worked with before. Yao Shou was the director. He never expected that most of the original cast and many movie actors would join this movie. In terms of momentum, it could not be compared to the movies of many directors and actors who had achieved before. However, Chae-in-juan still pushed back his schedule for half a year to join the parent company's annual blockbuster. He and Bai-ku were both important protagonists. When Poplar Fruit was injured, the movie was in full swing. Chae-in-juan was still able to ask for leave to visit him, which made Poplar Fruit very gratified. Later, Poplar Fruit recovered from his injuries and returned to Yangcheng. It was already late August and the movie was finally completed. Calling Beast and the others brought Chae-in-juan to Yangcheng to visit Poplar Fruit again. This friendship and camaraderie touched Poplar Fruit so much that he didn't want to reject it. Therefore, when the production team mentioned this matter, Poplar Fruit immediately thought of Chae-in-juan. After receiving Poplar Fruit's name list, producer Xie was not surprised. He knew about the relationship between Poplar Fruit and the country's new popular actor, Chae-in-juan. After some comparison, producer Xie realized that Chae-in-juan was really suitable for the theme of their next trip. Didn't Chae-in-juan become famous after filming a period drama after Unexpectedly? That guy was extraordinarily handsome when he wore ancient clothes. His aquiline nose quickly helped him attract a large number of female fans. After returning, Poplar Fruit contacted Chae-in-juan and called Chae-in-juan, who was on vacation in his hometown in Yangcheng, over. He invited a few good friends to have an outdoor barbecue and told him about this matter. Sure enough, not only did Chae-in-juan agree, he was also very surprised. There were not many opportunities to appear in front of the national audience like this, especially when his own work was about to be released. Chae-in-juan was almost grateful to Poplar Fruit. He felt that this was another support from Poplar Fruit. Although Chae-in-juan was already a second-tier film and television actor, he had experienced a lot of hardships since he was young. He had always placed himself in a very low position, especially when facing a benefactor like Poplar Fruit who had helped him greatly like a life mentor. Moreover, this year's Poplar Fruit was already a popular figure. He was popular all over the world. After calculating the time, after this episode's recording, the broadcast should be in mid-October. There was still a long time before the month of promotion before the movie was released. However, no matter what, this was a very good opportunity. Not to mention promotion, it was good to warm up. Chae-in-juan immediately called Wn He and Tianyi in Beijing and asked them to discuss the specific details of the cooperation with Mango TV. Chae-in-juan could not hold back and rushed back to Beijing the next day. He was also considered a workaholic. After all, he did not have any relatives to take care of. As for Poplar Fruit, after a week of peace, he was about to begin his 7th journey. Of course, this was also the second to last journey. He suddenly felt that time had passed very quickly. Everyone had just gathered together for the first time in May. In the blink of an eye, it was almost time for the program to end. Of course, it did not mean that everyone would not be friends after the program ended. After so many episodes of the program's recording, Poplar Fruit and Kiki had formed deep friendships with the other 4 pairs of father and son, and because the 5 families in this season were not the type to be blinded by greed, none of them treated the recording of the program as a stepping stone to fame. Instead, they saw it as a rare opportunity to bring their children out to play while working. Of course, this also had to do with the fact that the 5 guests had been famous for a long time, especially Liu Yi, Hu Jun, and Lin Yongjian. They had a wide range of acting careers and had achieved great things. They did not need a small bonus from the program to increase their qualifications. Poplar Fruit did not need to be mentioned. He had no intention of joining the entertainment industry. He was only here to accompany his daughter to play. No matter what, after the program's recording, they would still be good brothers. Kiki and the other 4 children would also still be good friends. However, for the new journey, it seemed like the program team was going to create some trouble. The night before the departure, Poplar Fruit and Kiki received the mission card and the props and costumes sent by the program team at home. Please wear the costumes provided by the program team and take the public transportation system to reach the portal of time. Poplar Fruit finished reading and looked at the cameraman in confusion. Where is the portal of time? On the other side, Fong Beibei and Kiki curiously opened the costumes sent by the program team. Fong Beibei burst out laughing. She covered her mouth and grabbed Poplar Fruit's arm, saying, "Uncle, look. You are going to cosplay again." Chapter 1423. She was really addicted to cosplay. Poplar Fruit was speechless as he looked at the costume that was obviously from the Qing dynasty. Of course, he didn't know that the next 2 or 3 days would be cosplay. Poplar Fruit almost spat out blood. Can't you come up with something new? Early the next morning, Poplar Fruit and his daughter dressed up. Young Guo was wearing a plain mandarin jacket and linen trousers. Although he was carrying a small bag and his outfit was very rustic, when he wore it on the tall young Guo, he looked like a well-hidden, of course, it could be seen at a glance, martial arts expert. Kiki was wearing a Manchurian Qing dynasty dress. Of course, the color was not very bright. She was wearing a navy blue low-collared gown with white cuffs and a cyan satin skirt. The simple and plain clothes matched the little girl's extraordinary face. She was like a Chinese Manchurian Qing version of Cinderella. Why don't you dress like a princess this time? I like to wear a princess dress. The little girl put on her clothes, bounced on the sofa, and said to her father with a smile. She mischievously said a few words, but her tone didn't mean that she wanted to wear a princess dress. Who said you're not like a princess? You're a princess. Poplar Fruit said to his daughter with a smile. Do you still remember the story of Little Swallow? You're the little princess who lived among the common people. Oh, I remember. When Kiki and her father went back to their hometown, they watched the antique costume TV series Princess Pearl with their grandparents. Although they didn't finish watching it and only watched a few episodes, she still knew the identity of Little Swallow. Then, Papa, are you the emperor? Poplar Fruit grinned and said, yes, but Papa can't reveal his identity now. You see, Papa and you can only wear such clothes. We have to keep a low profile. So, we're on a very mysterious mission. The little girl held her small face in surprise, but then looked around, afraid of being heard, so she asked in a low voice. That's right. Poplar Fruit gave him a thumbs up. After he finished packing, he picked up the luggage prepared by Fong Beibei. Fong Beibei had already gone to class, so he was alone. He brought his daughter and ran towards the so-called Gate of Time. In the end, he was told that the Gate of Time was in the famous film city in Jiangnan. Alright, the production crew really liked to torment people. They actually had to wear such clothes. First, they had to take the subway to the airport. Then, they had to wear such clothes and take the plane to Jiangnan. Poplar Fruit felt like he was going to be laughed at on the way there. Holding his daughter's hand, Poplar Fruit embarked on the journey of being watched slowly. They hadn't even left the neighborhood yet. On the way, they were spotted by a few neighbors. They were fine, as they were all people of status and quality. They waved their hands to greet them, then hid to the side. They didn't make a sound and only mouthed, "Are you recording where Daddy is going?" Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded at them and waved his hand. But when they were outside, young Guo could no longer be the center of attention, especially in the crowded subway in Yangcheng. Along the way, many people were looking at Poplar Fruit and Kiki. Many people were able to quickly identify Poplar Fruit and Kiki. Most of them were fine, as they took out their phones and secretly took photos from afar. A few were very bold and ran over to Poplar Fruit to ask for his autograph. Hey, you see, I am not a singer, nor an actor. I am also not a big star. Why do you want my autograph? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. He handed Kiki over to the staff to help take care of her. Although he said that, he didn't put on airs. He still took my daughter's notebook and seriously signed his name on it. He had even used the clerical calligraphy that he had learned from his professor when he was studying for his PhD in the Chinese department. The strokes were firm and beautiful. Of course, it was also very slow. Otherwise, Poplar Fruit's hands would have been tired from signing autographs on the subway. On the subway, some fans couldn't wait to get off. In the end, a few my daughter who had nothing to do escorted Poplar Fruit and Kiki to the airport. You have to study hard. Poplar Fruit and Kiki said goodbye to the group of fans. Kiki also waved her hand obediently and said sweetly, "Goodbye, sister." Poplar Fruit dressed up like this and still managed to get on the plane. It seemed that the program team put in a lot of effort. After getting on the plane, Poplar Fruit was still surrounded by onlookers, but it was much better than on the subway. Kiki didn't have to hide behind her father shyly. Finally, Poplar Fruit and the others arrived at the film city. The car passed through one imitation building after another and finally arrived at the super-huge Ming and Qing Palace. Poplar Fruit held his daughter's hand and walked in. He introduced to his daughter, "It is said that this is an imitation of the Forbidden City. Except for the antiques, everything else is exactly the same as the real one. What do you mean by one-to-one?" Kiki was very smart, but Poplar Fruit didn't let the little girl come in contact with too much knowledge beyond her level. "It means that it looks the same as it did before," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "You've been to the Forbidden City before. Don't you think it's as big as the Forbidden City?" "Yes, it's super huge." Kiki kept looking left and right, and her eyes couldn't stop looking. She suddenly shouted as if she had discovered a new continent, "Papa, look, the village chief. I see the village chief." Poplar Fruit and Kiki were the first to arrive, so they were the first to greet the village chief, who had become Eunuch Li. However, before they could say anything to the village chief, the other children also arrive. The second to arrive was the cold and aloof Kang Kang. He wore an official's robe and walked over proudly with Hu Jun, who had been reduced to a guard with a sword. Kiki ran over happily and wanted to hold brother Kang Kang's hand. However, Kang Kang ignored her coldly and had a mysterious smile on his face. However, Kiki didn't want to be spoiled by brother Kang Kang's coldness. The little girl's strength was there, so when she reached out to grab his hand, Kang Kang could only obediently let her hold his hand. The little girl didn't take this half-forced, half-pushed hand-holding seriously. She smiled and pulled brother Kang Kang's hand, wanting to walk forward together. Of course, Kang Kang refused in his heart. However, before he could resist, another child came. Furthermore, it was Kiki's other good friend, Nuo Yi. Chichi was overjoyed as she released big brother Kang Kang's hand. Pulling her skirt, she jogged away, leaving Chairman Kang Kang alone in the wind. The other children arrived one after another. Nuo Yi, who became the little brother, Shen Xian, who became the crown prince, and Da Jun, who became a pitiful beggar. However, the situation wasn't as happy as the children imagined. The moment it started, the situation took a turn for the worse. Suddenly, a group of aggressive Imperial guards came and directly pressed Poplar Fruit to the ground. With a snap, shackles were put on him. Chapter 14:24. Sweat. What's going on? Poplar Fruit knew the person in the lead. He was Chaeyan Juan. Don't be fooled by the fact that he was tall, dressed like Hu Jun, and mixed in with a group of bodyguards. Yang Guo, who was caught, raised his head and saw Chaeyan Juan looking at him with a smile in his eyes. Kiki, who just ran to the village head's side, was a little confused. She didn't know what was going on. She thought it was a joke. "Take him away," Chaeyan Juan roared. A group of extras dragged Poplar Fruit outside. Poplar Fruit saw Chaeyan Juan winking at him. Naturally, he knew that the program crew was tormenting him. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and shook his head. He pretended to struggle desperately, but he didn't use any strength. Instead, he followed the footsteps of the people who were grabbing him. "Help, help me, I'm innocent. Why did you catch me?" Poplar Fruit's shouts were very effective. His sorrowful voice made people feel a little sorry for him. At this time, Kiki finally reacted. The little girl pouted, lifted her skirt, and quickly ran over. Halfway, she was intercepted by Chaeyan Juan. Kiki waved her little fist and hit Chaeyan Juan's stomach. Her eyes began to turn red, and her voice was a little choked as she said, "Let go of my papa. Don't catch my papa, En." Fortunately, Chaeyan Juan was trained. Otherwise, if his stomach was hammered by Kiki's little hand, even an adult wouldn't be able to withstand it. Kiki was very strong. "We caught him because he committed a crime." Chaeyan Juan saw that his little niece was about to cry, and his heart didn't feel good. However, he could only hold back his laughter and said seriously, "Kiki, I didn't do anything. Save me." Poplar Fruit looked at his daughter pitifully. He finally understood why he was dressed so plainly. It turned out that he was used to be caught. "My papa is a good person. You got the wrong person." When Kiki heard her father's words, She immediately struggled. The little girl's eyes were filled with tears. She really wanted to save her father. Kiki, let us help you. At this time, Kang, who was wearing an official's uniform, and the beggar, Da Jun, who was carrying a dog beating stick, swaggered over. Kiki, tell them that I didn't do anything wrong, that I'm a good person. Poplar Fruit shouted pitifully as he knelt on the ground while being surrounded by a group of people. You, I told you, but it's useless. Chichi was blocked by Che Injuan, so she didn't recognize Che Injuan, who had changed his clothes for a moment. Pleading for leniency was useless, and his martial prowess was too weak. The little girl cried until her eyes were full of tears. She clutched her hands, looking very pitiful. Did you wet your pants last night? Kang didn't seem to be here to save people. He seemed to be here to tear down the stage. Although he was cold, his words were shocking, but they seemed to be very harmonious. Che Injuan, this guy, could actually keep a straight face. After hearing Kang's words, he seemed to ponder for a moment and said seriously, yes, he wet his pants last night. I didn't wet my pants. Poplar Fruit was so angry that he laughed. Che Injuan, this guy, actually said that he wet his pants. But it seemed to be quite effective. Although it caused the adults to laugh, it was obvious that the few children were scared. Those who wet their pants will be taken away. Che Injuan let go of the frightened Kiki and let her stand with her friends. He returned to the middle of the group, waved his hand, and said in a loud voice. Poplar Fruit also had fun. Scenes from the previous episodes flashed through his mind. He saw Poplar Fruit struggling to be taken away, and then suddenly shouted, Shenxian, you have to be careful too. On the other side, Crown Prince Shenxian indeed became nervous. He cried as he pulled his father's hand and said anxiously, Woo, I don't want. But under Kiki's sad and pitiful little eyes, Poplar Fruit was taken away by a group of sideguards and Che Injuan. The little girl was left standing alone in the wide square, wiping her tears. Fortunately, there was a group of uncles asking the village chief how to save her father. The helpless little girl looked at the village chief pitifully. On the other side, after Poplar Fruit and Che Injuan left Kiki's sight, the sideguards let go of their hands. Che Injuan also smiled and patted Poplar Fruit's shoulders and knees, but had no intention of releasing Poplar Fruit's shackles. Poplar Fruit, I'm sorry. This is the request of the program team. They suddenly caught me for no reason, sigh. Poplar Fruit of course did not care. He smiled and said, they almost scared me. Fortunately, he did not start fighting. Otherwise, with his skills, even if Che Injuan was in front of him, these sideguards would not be enough. You're lucky. Che Injuan said with a smile. I just heard the director say that beggars are not allowed to enter the palace. Teacher Lin and the others will be kicked out later. Without saying much, they came to the front of the dungeon. Poplar Fruit received Che Injuan's explanation of the next part of the script. Someone went out to take a look and suddenly ran back. She's here, she's here. Kiki is here. Several guards quickly supported Poplar Fruit and made him kneel on the ground. Poplar Fruit stretched his neck, and then Che Injuan pulled out a long knife and waved it on Poplar Fruit's neck. She's here. Kiki appeared at the door. Don't cut off my head, I really didn't wet the bed yesterday. Poplar Fruit cried. No, don't kill my papa. Kiki cried until her eyes were blurred. She ran over, but when she saw that her father was about to die, she hurriedly lifted her skirt and rushed over. She hugged her father who was still shackled and pitifully turned her head to look at the bad guy with the knife. Poplar Fruit felt the cold tears on his daughter's face. He couldn't bear it, but this play still had to go on. Che Injuan threw the knife away. According to the script, he let go of his indifference, squatted down, gently held Kiki's waist, and said, Oh, such a lovely girl, why are you crying? Are you acting in a play? But Kiki didn't know. She thought that she still had a little use. The little girl wiped her tears with both hands and cried, Please, let my papa go, okay? My papa is a good person, really. But he wet the bed. Che Injuan explained. My papa didn't wet the bed, he really didn't wet the bed. Kiki cried. How do you know he didn't wet the bed? Che Injuan asked. Because maybe I wet the bed. Kiki cried and said in fear, My papa won't wet the bed. You wet the bed? Cheon-juan pretended to be surprised. But I haven't wet the bed for a long time. Kiki wiped her tears and said miserably. If it was you, then I would have arrested you. Cheon-juan deliberately rubbed his chin and asked, did I really catch the wrong person? Chapter 14:25. Cheon-juan was really too much. Why did he have to make such a lovely girl cry? God knows how many viewers behind the screen were going to fight for justice for Chichi. Seeing Kiki crying even more sadly, Poplar Fruit quickly made up a melodramatic plot. No, my daughter didn't wet the bed. If you want to arrest someone, arrest me. Papa. Kiki didn't know if she was moved or scared. She cried and hugged her father, holding her father's hand, as if she was worried that her father would leave. At this time, Cheon-juan also felt that he had attracted too much hatred. He didn't dare to play the cold guard captain anymore. He half-squatted and said to Kiki, tell uncle the truth, was it you or your father who wet the bed? I didn't wet the bed, and then my papa also didn't wet the bed. The little girl sobbed and said, can you let go of my papa? Not yet. We haven't found out who wet the bed, so we can't let him go. Cheon-juan saw that Kiki was about to cry again, so he quickly added, but I can spare his life. Come on, take Poplar Fruit to the prison and wait for the trial. And so, Chichi watched tearfully as her father was escorted into the dark prison. Kiki, save Dad. Although Poplar Fruit was locked in the prison, he still shouted loudly. It's okay, don't cry. Cheon-juan seemed to no longer be the guard captain, but a caring big brother, and said, he's okay, we'll give you an answer after the investigation. But, I don't want my papa to be locked up. The little girl's face was full of tears. She grabbed a tissue and cried. You don't have to worry about him, he's very comfortable in there. Cheon-juan said, listen, he said it's like a hotel, la la la, la la la. As soon as Cheon-juan spoke, Poplar Fruit's shouts came from the small prison. Kiki, come and save me. I don't want to stay here. There are rats in here. It's so scary. Poplar Fruit was also good at pretending. There were no rats in the prison. The prison was divided into several cells. There was only one cellmate in his cell. Although his hair was a little long and his clothes were a little tattered, he was still very clean. He even greeted him as soon as he came in. To cover up his lie, Cheon-juan purposely squeaked to cover up Poplar Fruit's voice. Then he said, look at how happy your father is. Kiki was a little confused. She looked at Cheon-juan innocently and pouted. But I heard everything. At this time, Kiki suddenly felt that Cheon-juan looked familiar. She frowned slightly and wiped away her tears. She stared at Cheon-juan with her reddened eyes, which made Cheon-juan a little flustered. I know. Kiki suddenly pouted and said angrily, I know your Uncle Che. Cheon-juan panicked. He didn't expect Kiki to find out at this time. He was a little hesitant. But Uncle Che, why did you catch my papa? Aren't you good friends? Kiki asked while sobbing. Looking at the little girl's big tearful eyes, Cheon-juan suddenly felt that he was the biggest sinner in the world. Cheon-juan coughed and took a tissue to wipe Kiki's tears. Kiki, you're mistaken. I'm bodyguard Che, not your Uncle Che. But you look like him, and your voice is also very similar. Kiki sobbed and said, Uncle Che, can you let go of my papa? I beg you. Ouch. Cheon-juan had a headache. He hesitated and said, actually, I just look like your Uncle Che. I'm not your Uncle Che. How about this? Don't cry. Uncle Che, no, bodyguard Che will go with you to see your papa. Let's see if there's any way to save your father, okay? Kiki's eyes immediately lit up. She nodded her head hopefully. Just as they entered the prisoners in the cell next to them stretched out their black hands, howled, and made a terrifying sound. Kiki was so scared that she turned around and ran away. Cheon-juan also quickly chased after her. Kiki, what's wrong with you? I'm scared. You tell them not to stretch out their hands. Then don't talk. The little girl was so scared that she was about to cry. She said while choking with sobs. The little girl's appearance was really serious. She made a request to the bodyguard captain. Then, not only the audience, but even Che and Juan couldn't help but look up to the sky and grin when Kiki wasn't looking. Kiki, Kiki, don't ignore me. Come and save me. Father wants to see you. The moment young Guo saw his daughter running away with her hair, he started to shout again. Of course, the cellmate next to him also asked questions randomly. Poplar Fruit casually answered 2 of his questions, but it attracted more questions. This must be the program group's plan. Poplar Fruit suddenly thought of Tang Sanzang, played by Luo Jiuying. At this time, hearing her father's call, Kiki finally plucked up the courage to go to the prison cell to see her father. When she overcame her fear, the little girl found that the terrible black hands were gone. Of course, they were gone. They were still quarreling. How could the program be recorded? Suddenly, there was a riot. Che and Juan's hands were caught by Poplar Fruit's cellmate. Of course, Poplar Fruit also helped. He pulled Che and Juan's sleeves and tied a knot. However, this cellmate was actually unreliable. After he tied the knot, he laughed and teased Kiki. Please, let my papa out, okay? Kiki begged pitifully. She found that this grandfather with messy hair seemed to be the most powerful person. Then you have to answer my question. Do you like your father? The cellmate began to steal the show. Yes, I do. Can you give me the key? Kiki looked at him expectantly. The others didn't say anything. They just watched with a smile. This must be good material. Yes, but you have to go back to my question. Do you like your mother? I like her too. Can you give me the key? Please, my papa really didn't wet the bed. Kiki begged pitifully. But you have to answer my question first. Do you like your father or your mother more? He really had a lot of questions. Poplar Fruit had tried before. I like both. Kiki was not fooled. Can you give it to me? You are a good person. One more question. Who is your mother's father's daughter's daughter? This walk-on actor actually asked a long series of tongue-twisting questions. Even the audience couldn't react in time. But Poplar Fruit snickered in his heart. Testing my daughter? You really haven't seen the genius of the Yang family. That's me. Sure enough, Kiki answered without hesitation. Chapter 1426. The little girl's pure heart made people have a whole new level of respect for her, and that Tang Sanzang inmate was still there deceiving Kiki to let Kiki answer more questions. It was believed that at this time, many of the audience had a face full of smiles, and then clenched their fists, wanting to jump into the screen and beat him up. Poplar Fruit also couldn't stand it anymore. He coughed twice and said, Kiki, don't be fooled by him. If he had the key, he would have already gotten out. Otherwise, why would he be locked up here with Dad? The little girl was stunned for a moment, and then turned to look at Che and Juan, who had already taken the opportunity to break free. She put her palms together, very pitifully looked at Che and Juan and said, Uncle Che, I beg you, let go of my dad, okay? Cough, I'm not your Uncle Che. Che and Juan of course couldn't be cold to the little girl. He squatted down, and softly said to Kiki, well, if you perform well, your dad can be released sooner. Then what should I do? Kiki asked nervously. Let's go, let's talk outside. Che and Juan picked up Kiki. Kiki, you have to work hard, perform well, and get Dad out of here as soon as possible. Poplar Fruit grabbed the cell door, and tried his best to act. I know. The little girl also waved at her father, her little face full of determination. Outside the door, Che and Juan put down Kiki. He was very gentle. After all, they were acquaintances, and Che and Juan also watched Kiki grow up. That year, they even made an unexpected micro-movie together. Kiki, you have to take my saber and stand here. Che and Juan looked at his little niece as if he was looking at his own daughter, full of love, but he couldn't let Kiki feel that he was too friendly, otherwise, he wouldn't be able to continue the act later. Kiki took the saber, and obediently stood at the door of the prison with the 2 guards in yellow jackets, but she was looking at Che and Juan suspiciously. What are you looking at me for? Che and Juan couldn't help but ask. I feel like you're my Uncle Che. The little girl muttered, my Uncle Che also hugged me like you. The little girl was very smart. Che and Juan's face was covered in sweat. He had been squatting all this time, maintaining a height that was not too different from Chich's. He smiled and said, "All right, let's not care about whether Uncle Che is Uncle Che or not. You need to stand guard obediently and not let the bad guys in. This way your father will be released sooner." "I will be very obedient." The little girl stood upright with her saber in one hand. She looked very valiant, just like the military posture she had learned during military training. "Kiki, you're the best." Che Enjuan smiled. He was no longer as majestic as before. Instead, he had become Kiki's sidekick. He pulled a long face and said, "Are you thirsty? Shall I get you a drink?" "Sure. I want to drink it." The little girl nodded and said. She didn't seem to be so scary now. The smart little girl began to figure out something. Che Enjuan eagerly brought it to Kiki and even helped her insert the straw. This attentive performance made the fans who had turned into haters start to change their minds. "It seems that he's not that bad." Kiki sucked on the cuckoo star while looking at Che Enjuan with her beautiful black pearl-like eyes. She said, "Uncle Che, can you also give this milk to my papa to drink? I'm afraid that he's thirsty. He was injured before, and he just recovered." "Okay. No problem." Che Enjuan quickly ran in with a bottle of milk and handed it to Poplar Fruit, who was being tortured by his long-winded cellmate. He casually said, "Your daughter gave it to me." Then, he ran out. This guy, if he got married and had children, he would definitely be a child slave. His concern and love for Kiki were all expressed on his face. When he came back, he faced Kiki, who was rolling her eyes and staring at him. "Why do you keep looking at me like this?" Che Enjuan touched his face and asked. "Your Uncle Che." Kiki pouted her small mouth and unhappily said, "Just now you said yes." Che Enjuan thought for a moment and realized that he was careless just now and stepped into Kiki's trap. He blushed with shame and reached out to touch Kiki's cute little head with two pigtails. He smiled and said, "Okay, I admit, I'm your Uncle Che. Then why did you catch my papa? You're still lying." The little girl angrily asked. Looking at her pure eyes, even if she knew that he was acting, Che Enjuan suddenly felt a sense of guilt flooding over him like a mountain and a sea. "It's my fault, it's my fault." Che Enjuan raised his hands and feet and said, "Okay, I'll be honest. Uncle Che was actually carrying out a mission in the game, just like your father. Your father was locked up. This is the requirement of the game. It needs you to work hard and then let your father out," Che Enjuan said. Then I've been very obedient. Can you let go of my papa?" Kiki put on a pitiful look and said to Che Enjuan, "You and my papa are good friends, can you let him go?" Che Enjuan was about to say something when suddenly, a group of people came over. The palace maids chattered noisily as they swarmed around him. The scale was huge. The person in the lead had an outstanding temperament and was dressed like a graceful and rich empress. The audience who often watched TV series immediately recognized her. "Isn't this Ning Jin?" That year, Sunny Days made her famous. Then, she starred in The New Beach with Liu Tianwang and her brother. She also starred in movies like Gun Hunt, Love Call Shift, Founding a Nation and so on. She was definitely a veteran actor that everyone was familiar with. Of course, Ning Jin was also brought here by another veteran actor, Lin Yongzhen. Seeing Ning Jin, Che Enjuan hurriedly ran up according to the script, knelt down, and said in a particularly flattering voice, "Oh, Imperial Concubine Ning, you came?" Kiki was a bit confused. This new Imperial Concubine Ning was someone that Kiki had never seen before. She foolishly grabbed Che Enjuan's sword and stood at the door at a loss. What a lovely girl. Half of Ning Jin's acting, half of Ning Jin really liked her. She squatted down and sweetly held Kiki's hand and asked, "Can you tell Imperial Concubine Ning, what's your name?" After talking for a while, Kiki, who felt that a great person had come, began to beg pitifully, "Imperial Concubine Ning, can you please let my father go?" Imperial Concubine Ning brought Kiki to Poplar Fruit. When Poplar Fruit saw a newcomer, he quickly ran to the prison door to ask for help. "It's not impossible to let you go." Ning Jin pinched his orchid fingers and said in a tired voice, "But our family doesn't have such a big power. I'll bring your daughter into the palace. Whether you can come out or not, It depends on your daughter's performance. Chapter 14:27. Kiki had been abducted by Ning Jin, but Poplar Fruit was not afraid. Although it was the first time they met, Ning Jin knew how much he liked Kiki when he saw her beaming with joy, but after his daughter left, Poplar Fruit could only stay alone in the prison. Actually, there was no problem staying in the prison. The bed was clean, and it was quite comfortable to lie down. There was no need to rush the filming. But how could there be such a good thing? Poplar Fruit had just sat down when he saw the long-haired extras grinning and coming over. "Hey, can you chat with me for a while? I've been locked up for decades, and no one has ever chatted with me." Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and looked helplessly at the guy who had been chatting with him for half an hour. He didn't know where the program team found this weirdo, but he could talk for half a day and not repeat the same thing. But the main thing was that the topics he talked about were very common and boring. Poplar Fruit felt that his IQ would be lowered by chatting with such a guy. Right, IQ. Poplar Fruit looked at the other party with an evil smile. He put his hands on the shoulders of the Tang Sanzang cellmate and said, "How about this? Since it's boring anyway, it's better to learn than to chat. In the future, when you get out, you can have another skill to make a living. Let's learn Hindi." Coincidentally, Poplar Fruit had recently been arranging Hindi as a minor course for students. Hindi was relatively popular, because domestic manufacturers had recently begun to plan for Hindi and Africa. Learning Hindi would definitely be of great help to them in finding jobs in the future. Ah! Tang Sanzang was dumbfounded. He looked at Poplar Fruit with a confused expression. Poplar Fruit saw this and was secretly happy. He said, "No. Learn well. Today, let's talk about the branches and origins of Hindi and its development in modern times." While the other party was in a daze, Poplar Fruit began his lecture. This was actually a lesson that Poplar Fruit had prepared for himself. Although it hadn't started yet, he had already prepared a draft in advance. If it was Poplar Fruit's own student, not many people would make a fuss. But this was the first time the Tang Sanzang cellmate and the national audience had seen Poplar Fruit teach with their own eyes. Although the sudden change in style made people laugh, Poplar Fruit's completely unscripted class made everyone, including the cameraman, speechless. Looking at Poplar Fruit's appearance, he was the real chatterbox. He was able to talk non-stop for half a day, unlike the walk-on Tang Sanzang, who only spoke nonsense. Yang Guo's words had substance, and he quoted from many sources. He even used small stories from Hindi to make the audience indulge in it. Although this scene was not kept in the program later released an hour-long behind-the-scenes video that recorded Poplar Fruit's lecture to his cellmate. These were all very basic lessons. Even people who had a little foundation in Hindi could understand them. Not to mention Tang Sanzang's cellmate, even the walk-ons in the cells outside were leaning on the door and listening with great interest. Poplar Fruit's teaching video was confirmed by the students. It was indeed the same content as his usual classes in school. Poplar Fruit's teaching was also widely praised by the audience and students. It could be said that the number of people who listened in on Poplar Fruit's class often exceeded the number of students who chose his class. Of course, there was a high turnover of audit students. When Poplar Fruit's class became more in-depth, most of the audit students who just wanted to join in the fun would gradually give up. However, the netizens on the internet were very vocal. Poplar Fruit was even called the Yuan Tongfei of the language world. Everyone wanted someone to record more of Poplar Fruit's teaching videos and put them on the internet. After a discussion among the leaders of Higoshiyama University, they decided to send a professional cameraman to record Poplar Fruit's class and make it into a public class video for the netizens to learn from. This was not because Higoshiyama University was generous, but because recording such a basic level of public class would not make Higoshiyama University lose much. On the contrary, it could increase the fame of Higoshiyama University. Moreover, they were still holding back. In the future, there might be a lot of talented students who would come to Higoshiyama University to learn from Poplar Fruit after learning the basic courses online. In fact, the impact of this matter was far more than that. Next year, after Poplar Fruit obtained the status of professor, the Science and Education channel of CCTV would come and invite Poplar Fruit to participate in the lecture room. It would even give a new lease of life to this science and education program that had been going on for 15 years. Of course, this was something that would happen in the future. Back in reality, Kiki, who had left her father's side with concubine Ning, was brought to the palace. Together with the crown prince Shen Xian and the general's son Nuo Yi, they learned ancient court etiquette. It could be seen that concubine Ning liked children very much. Whether it was the smart and cute Kiki, the clumsy and adorable Shen Xian, or the silly and sweet Nuo Yi, they could all make concubine Ning, who had previously shown excellent palace drama acting skills, laugh like a child. Ning Jin taught the three children little by little what to do when paying respects and what to kowtow to them. He was also very careful. Although he would raise his face from time to scare the three little guys, Ning Jin was secretly laughing behind them. Next, Ning Jin took out a pair of unique shoes. The soles of the shoes were high, like a pair of delicate women's shoes stepping on a square stone. This was a kind of shoes that the palace maids of the Qing dynasty wore called flowerpot soles. Compared to high heels, the flowerpot soles were more balanced and didn't need to stand as hard as standing on tiptoes. It feels weird. After Kiki put it on, she suddenly grew 10 centimeters taller. Not only did her field of vision widen, but she also felt like she was riding on clouds. But from the audience's point of view, the little girl seemed to have grown up again. Before, she still had the appearance of a child. Now that she had changed into the exquisite robes of the palace, she had become so thin and tall. Moreover, her small face was so delicate that it was not inferior to a young girl's. It had to be said that Kiki now looked like a 15 or 16-year-old little beauty. Come on, take 2 steps. Take it slow. That's right. Ning Jin smiled until her eyes were curved. She bent down and supported Kiki with her hands, letting her walk in the tall flowerpot soles. Although Chichi wasn't used to walking like she was walking on stilts, her excellent balance was on full display. She didn't waste too much time, and very soon, she was able to walk very smoothly. Now, I'll teach you the rules of walking in the palace. The first to walk on the stage was Shen Xian and Nuo Yi. The 2 little guys were a little nervous when facing concubine Ning, who was not kind. Shen Xian even walked with the same pace. Ayo, I'm dying of laughter. Concubine Ning couldn't help but cover her mouth and snicker. However, she didn't make things difficult for the 2 children. Instead, she praised and encouraged them. Now it was Kiki's turn. Chapter 1428. Some people described that ancient beauties walked like willow branches dancing in the spring breeze, bending their slender waists to take small steps, showing their white wrists under the light muslin. This was probably the image of Kiki walking on Shanshan when she was wearing the ancient high-heeled shoes at the bottom of a flower pot. It was really beautiful. At that moment, whether the camera was from the front, the back, or the side, there was almost no blind angle for 365 days, making people intoxicated. Kiki was not as nervous as Shen Xian and the others. This might be because she was a little familiar with Ning Jin, or it might be because the little girl was more open-minded. And her sense of balance was very good. When she walked, she didn't need to lower her head and bend down to prevent herself from falling. Just like when she walked, the little girl's posture was tall and straight, and her steps were natural. She held the silk scarf with both hands and gently swayed it as Ning Jin had just demonstrated. Although her little face was still slightly tense and a little nervous, it seemed that the little girl who liked the training naturally had a sweet smile on her face. Oh. Very, very good. Ning Jin clapped her hands and gave Kiki a thumbs up. She was also amazed. Ning Jin's many years of acting experience in movies and TV shows allowed her to cultivate a casual and freehand ancient style of walking, and her every move, every word, and every smile looked very natural. Especially the provocative look in her eyes, which made her look like a cunning fox who was full of attack power. But Kiki was different. She was more like a young and ignorant little princess. Her behavior was elegant and tranquil. Her smile could topple a city, and her smile could topple a country. Just like the sunny summer, her smile had turned into a tranquil pool of water in the West Lake. The learning only lasted for a while. The children were brought in front of the emperor, and there was another round of etiquette demonstration. Zhu Shimin, who played the emperor, was overwhelmed. Zhu Shimin didn't put on the airs of the emperor. He also slowly knelt down and kowtowed with them. Papa Xianxian, they said you are the emperor. You are very powerful. Can you let go of my papa? When she arrived at the emperor's place, Chichi, who had just adjusted her mood, didn't forget her father. She had been working very hard to complete the requests that imperial concubine Ning had given her. Only then did Chichi dare to ask for the emperor's help. Can you let go of my papa? I can guarantee that my papa didn't wet the bed. What Chichi didn't know was that even Zhu Shimin, who was acting, couldn't help but chuckle when she said this joke out loud. How could this child be so honest? Even until now, he still didn't know that it was just an excuse that Cheonjuan casually seized upon. Poor poplar fruit. He was tricked by his good friend. It was already halfway through the episode, but he was still drowning in the abyss of bedwetting. Of course, Kiki was very anxious. She looked at Zhu Shimin pitifully, hoping to get some good news from the familiar Uncle Zhu Shimin. Sure. In view of Yang Luoch's outstanding performance, you. Go release her father, poplar fruit. Zhu Shimin waved his hand and said in a very dignified manner. For the time being, ignoring poplar fruit, who could escape from prison and then catch up with Cheonjuan, Zhu Shimin took the smiling Kiki, his son, and a large group of children to eat lunch. It was a very sumptuous Manchu Han imperial feast. As soon as Xianxian came up, he rushed to the roasted duck leg. But when he touched it, he found that it was actually fake. Then, everyone sat in front of the beautiful but inedible banquet. They were stunned to see Lin Yongjian and his son, who were wearing the palace eunuch's clothes, come up with a plate. It turned out that after Lin Yongjian and his son were rejected as beggars, they pitifully walked on the street. Under the arrangement of the program, they had an unforgettable and sad journey of begging. In the end, fortunately, the palace posted a notice saying that they were recruiting people, so they changed out of their beggar clothes. But being a servant in the palace was not a happy thing. They were also subject to the unspoken rules of the palace. As soon as they came up, they were put in their place. They had to use the ancient method of washing clothes with a hammer to wash a large basin of clothes clean. After tormenting themselves for the whole morning, they finally returned to their friends. Of course, they were still playing the role of servants. No matter what, after all the hardships in the morning, everyone could finally sit down to eat and chat together. In fact, from another point of view, among the 5 pairs of father and son, there were some who were in dire straits, and some who enjoyed great wealth and splendor. It was hard to say who was luckier in choosing the role, but one thing was for sure. Whether they were poor or even in prison, or became a high-ranking official, general, or emperor, this morning was a precious memory for them. But the test for the children was not over yet. At noon, the emperor was resting in the palace. Kiki and Xian were playing at the door. However, a very naturally dressed man with a very strange expression wanted to sneak in. Kiki and Xian were still very confused, but the audience exclaimed, "Fan Shaowang, I'm looking for a jade seal. Do you know about the jade seal? It's a good thing to make ice cream." Fan Shaowang lied to the children. "I know about the jade seal. The jade seal is a very, very big seal. I've seen it on TV before." But Fan Shaohuang could not deceive the knowledgeable Chichi. The little girl pouted and frowned as she looked at the other party. She became very alert. "The imperial jade seal is not used to make ice cream. My papa made ice cream before." Fan Shaohuang, who was defeated, quickly stopped the little girl from explaining the process of making ice cream. He waved his hand and said, "Well, I'm actually looking for ice cream, not a jade seal. Do you want to eat ice cream? It's very comfortable to eat ice cream in such hot weather." The little foodie Xian's saliva was about to drown the palace. Chichi's eyes also lit up as she nodded her head. Whatever alertness she had was immediately thrown to the back of her mind. "Then let me in. When I find the ice cream, we'll eat it together, okay?" Fan Shaohuang said with a sly smile. But I don't think you're a good person." Chichi still had a little bit of reason left in her. She played with her pigtail and pouted her little mouth as she said unhappily. Kiki was the first to speak, which made Xian, who was eager to try, pause. "But Don't you want to eat ice cream? Fan Xiaohuang felt that he, a 40-year-old man, was going to be stumped by a 4-year-old my daughter. I want to eat ice cream. Kiki nodded, but then she shook her head and said, but there's no ice cream in it. He did not know if the little girl had learned her lesson in the second trip in the earthen building. This time, she did not dare to easily abandon her principles for ice cream. Yes, there's no ice cream in it. Xian finally mustered up the courage and said behind Kiki. Aya, how come the plan I thought of was useless against these two children? Also, Xian, aren't you a foodie? What happened to your disregard for your own safety? Chapter 1429. Hey, it's okay, I'll just go in for a while, just for a while. I'll come out right away. Fan Xiaohuang coaxed the two children. He was mentally and physically exhausted. He felt like he could not exert his strength and wanted to force his way through. No. Kiki bravely opened her arms and said seriously, Xian's daddy is sleeping, you can't go in. Yes, you can't go in. Xian followed suit and opened his arms. How about this? How about you let me go in for a while, and then I'll come out to buy you ice cream? Fan Xiaohuang laughed. He almost couldn't hold on anymore. Why were the two children so stubborn? Xian was obviously moved. He licked his lips and his eyes lit up like a small light bulb. This was not a big deal. A small concession in exchange for a super delicious ice cream. This was a profitable business. He wanted to agree, but he still hesitated and looked at Kiki's sister. With sister here, he felt that sister should be the one to make the decision. Kiki was also obviously moved, but soon Kiki righteously refused. No, Xian, go and call your daddy, say that a bad guy is coming in. Fan Xiaohuang's panic and the audience's laughter erupted like a volcano at this moment. Oh, this child is too funny. Who knows how many people laughed until their stomach cramped. Fan Xiaohuang's sullen expression became the best background. The director had no choice but to stretch out two fingers. The spy inside, the eunuch who served the emperor, understood that it was time to carry out Plan B. He ran in and woke up Zhu Shimin, who was pretending to be asleep. There was no other way. If he didn't use the backup script, the show couldn't go on. Who are you? How did you get in? Zhu Shimin came out and asked in a very imposing manner. Unfortunately, Zhu Shimin's acting was still not good enough. If he asked who are you, it would definitely be more interesting. Of course, Zhu Shimin was just a star in the sports industry. His performance was already good. Forget the lines, he could be a little more forgiving. After Zhu Shimin and Fan Xiaohuang talked for a long time, they finally broke down and started fighting. Fan Xiaohuang's acting skills were obviously better. Before the fight started, he still had a cynical and shifty look. There was no trace of the kind-looking and innocent little monk from back then. On the other hand, Zhu Shimin knew that his acting skills were not up to par, so he simply brought out the boxing moves he was most familiar with. With his flashy boxing moves and blurred footwork, he was like a boxing champion wearing the clothes of an emperor. Show me your legs. After Zhu Shimin finished showing off his legs, he pointed at Fan Xiaohuang as if they were having a street dance competition. Indeed, there was something fishy going on between the two of them. Fan Xiaohuang put away his acting skills and began to show off his punches and kicks. Needless to say, Fan Xiaohuang, who was a martial arts actor, had a solid foundation in kung fu. Finally, the duel began. Zhu Shimin and Fan Xiaohuang had a good time fighting. The boxing champion's fists came and went without a trace, hitting Fan Xiaohuang's arm with a bang. It felt like his fists were sinking into flesh. Xian and Kiki, who were watching from behind, were so excited that they screamed and jumped up and down, shouting for Xuan's papa to do it. Fan Xiaohuang seemed to only have the strength to parry, but after a while, Zhu Shimin's moves slowed down. Fan Xiaohuang took the opportunity to grab Zhu Shimin's arm and pushed him back. This time, Fan Xiaohuang's arm was like a spring, but anyone could see that Zhu Shimin was acting. Zhu Shimin also used his own strength. Otherwise, how could he fly so high? I can't do it anymore. You guys go. Zhu Shimin waved his hand. He did not look like he could not do it at all. Instead, His wave made people feel like he was closing the door and letting Xianxian and Kiki go. It was true that newborn calves weren't afraid of tigers. Xianxian and Chichi rushed out while shouting loudly. Looking at Xuanxuan's tense little face and Chichi's giggling face, they were really too cute. The 2, 3 or 4-year-old children clenched their little fists and punched the big bad Fan Xiaohuang. Fan Xiaohuang hurriedly parried and did not dare to fight back. At first, he was still smiling and squatting down to play with the 2 children, but gradually, he could only use his hands to block. Later, he could only dodge. Xianxian had the posture of a little boxing champion. His 2 little fists were clenched, and his left and right uppercuts were very stylish. His punches were fast and accurate, like a storm of pear blossoms hitting Fan Xiaohuang's face. He almost KO'd Fan Xiaohuang, who was in his 40s. Hey, don't hit the face. Didn't I tell you? Don't hit the face. Zhu Shimin hurriedly shouted. At this time, Fan Xiaohuang did not dare to be careless. He quickly stood up. Needless to say, the little guy was not like an adult when fighting. He did not hold back his strength, and it was very painful when he fought. Moreover, Fan Xiaohuang still had to act. He. Kiki was a step slower, but the little girl also put up a posture to attack. Xianxian did not have time to learn from poplar fruit, but Kiki had inherited from poplar fruit. Her Ben boxing was a mixture of the essence of a lot of kung fu. Although it was not as powerful, the moves were first class. One moment, it was Taiji fist, the next moment, it was Xingyi fist, and then it was Ba Guazhong swimming dragon. Coupled with the little girl's clear voice, the little guy's figure was like a butterfly jumping around, and it was so handsome that the audience did not want to. Wow, you are so good. Fan Xiaohuang laughed as he dodged. It was not just good looking. Chichi was the same as Xianxian. She didn't know how to control her strength, and she couldn't control her strength. Even with her strength that was different from a mortal's, Fan Xiaohuang still cried out in pain when her punches and kicks landed on his body. 60% of them were real pain. Okay. Zhu Shimin saw his son and Kiki fiercely hammering Fan Xiaohuang's butt. He quickly stopped them. If Fan Xiaohuang continued to fight, he was worried that the guests he invited would not be able to withstand the beating. Zhu Shimin said a few words of education, and then praised Kiki and Xuanxuan's outstanding performance in protecting the emperor. He said, "That's how it should be. You must stick to your principles and not be deceived by the small favors of bad people. Okay, eunuch, take them to buy ice cream." Zhu Shimin smiled and shook his head as he watched the eunuch conspicuously leave with the cheering Kiki and Xianxian. After all, they were still children. Your son's little fists really have inherited your teachings. Fan Xiaohuang waited until they left and the camera was removed before he smiled and said to Zhu Shimin, "Did you see Kiki's punches and kicks just now?" Zhu Shimin did not continue the topic. "Yes, I saw it. She really has practiced it. Her posture is very good. I don't know how her father taught her. Such a young girl has practiced so well. It's hard to say about fighting, but if she acted in a movie, she could have debuted as a martial arts child star." Fan Xiaohuang was not stingy with his praise. That's because poplar fruit has real martial arts. I am not his opponent. Zhu Shimin said this with a proud expression. But he promised to take Xianxian as his disciple. Haha, my son is still the lucky one. Even his friend, Fan Xiaohuang, couldn't stand the smug look on his face. Chapter 1430. In the afternoon, everyone who had been separated for a long time finally gathered together again. Along with them were the guests invited by their fathers. With their introductions, some of the audience members who were unable to recognize all of them finally managed to recall these guests from the depths of their memories. Poplar Fruit invited Che Enjuan. He became famous from Never Would I Have Expected and then acted in many popular period dramas. In recent years, he had become widely known. Of course, Poplar Fruit wanted to cooperate with Che Enjuan's publicity and simply introduced the movie that Che Enjuan had just finished filming. Previously, the audience members who were still brooding over Che Enjuan catching Poplar Fruit and causing Kiki to cry were relieved. They saw another side of Che Enjuan. He treated Kiki like his own daughter. He was gentle and intimate. Liu Yi invited little Zhong Wei. There was no need to introduce him. He was the lead singer of the Flowers. After he went solo, he became really popular on Mango TV's 100 Changes show. Then, last year, he even went on the stage of the Spring Festival Gala and sang a divine song, Double Shuang Er. Concubine Ning Jin, whose acting skills were off the charts, was invited by Lin Yongjian as a good friend. Both of them were veteran actors, so there was no need to introduce them. Everyone knew each other. Finally, Zhu Shimin invited Fan Xiaohuang. Coincidentally, Fan Xiaohuang had a classic character before. That was Xuzhu from Demigods and Semidevils. However, that was in the 1997 version, and in another version, Hu Jun's character, Xiao Feng, was also loved by the entire nation. Therefore, the two of them were considered to have some fate. Wait, it seems like there's one person missing. It turned out that the guest invited by Hu Jun did not arrive in time and would only appear tomorrow. However, in the upcoming Parent-Child Sports Day, there would be guests participating. Without the help of a guest, Hu Jun could only find a helper from a large group of extras. The first competition was for the guest. They had to sit cross-legged on the soft cushion and use their hands to drag themselves forward bit by bit until they reached the distant finish line. Concubine Ning put on a woman's coquettish and unreasonable skill, coquettishly making everyone allow her to start from the center position. This group of guests, including Che and Juan, did not tiptoe around. From the beginning, they were shouting and yelling, showing that they were going all out. However, Poplar Fruit, who was watching from the sidelines, knew that the outcome would not be surprising. After all, Che and Juan, who had real kung fu, would never be left behind by others. Even for Fan Xiaohuang, he had only scratched the surface and had not gone deep into the essence of kung fu. Therefore, following the village chief's whistle, Che and Juan used his powerful waist and abdomen to pull the cushion forward like a spring. If he had to come up with a metaphor to describe it, then Che and Juan was like a fat rabbit. Although it was a little clumsy, it was still a nimble rabbit. Behind him was another fat rabbit, Fan Xiaohuang. He gritted his teeth and chased after him with all his might. If Che and Juan was first, then he was not. In front of them, there was still Ning Jin, who was relying on the starting line in the middle and still had the advantage. However, this advantage could not be maintained for long. Soon, the slow Ning Jin was overtaken by Che and Juan and Fan Xiaohuang. She was so anxious that she screamed, but there was no other way. After all, Ning Jin was also old. Ning Jin, little Zhong Wei, and the walk-on at the back gradually formed the final group of laggards. If the two in front were fat rabbits, then the three of them were like silly fat pigs. Not to mention running, it was difficult for them to even move slowly. On the side, the fathers and children's groups who were watching were already in a mess. All kinds of screams were incessant, trying their best to cheer for the guests. Living up to everyone's expectations, Che and Juan maintained his lead and was the first to jump over the finish line. Behind him, Fan Xiaohuang, who was panting, slowly hit the finish line. Che and Juan jumped out from the cushion and opened his arms with a victorious smile. "Uncle Che, you're too awesome." Kiki was so excited that she screamed. She spread her long legs and jumped into Che and Juan's arms. Che and Juan also excitedly lifted the little girl's arm high up in the air, as if Chichi was his trophy. Behind them, Concubine Ning, who was about to reach the finish line, was shaking her heavy hair ornaments and panting tiredly. However, it seemed that little Zhong Wei would eventually catch up. Fortunately, little Zhong Wei was very gentlemanly and courteous, so Ning Jin escaped the embarrassment of being last in the starting line. Of course, the village chief could not help but run out, laughing and ridiculing, causing Concubine Ning to roll her eyes. Immediately, the next exercise began. This time, it was finally the father's turn. However, it was no longer moving the cushions, but rolling around in the quilt. Before this, the village chief asked about Poplar Fruit with concern. After all, this guy was seriously injured. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit had already recovered. In the previous trip, he could not do any strenuous exercise, but this time, he could go all out. With the help of Che and Juan and Kiki, Poplar Fruit was wrapped in a red quilt and tied up. In front of the camera, Poplar Fruit even imitated the squirming of a worm, making Kiki and the audience laugh. Ready? Let's start. The village head ordered, and all the fathers began to roll. As soon as it started, the 5 fathers went all out. Everyone gathered their strength and swung their bodies. Very quickly, like Liu Yi, he turned into a wooden stake with its branches cut off. He placed it on the ground and began to roll over to the other side. In the beginning, Poplar Fruit's advantage was not obvious because he did not use his hands or feet, so his speed could not be reflected. In fact, Liu Yi was even slightly faster than Poplar Fruit by a body's length. But very quickly, Poplar Fruit's outstanding physique came into play. While Liu Yi, Hu Jun and the rest were spinning around in circles, feeling dizzy and disoriented, and needed to catch their breath, Yang Guo was still able to continue spinning towards the finish line in a spurt of energy. Still need to go over. Poplar Fruit stopped dizzily but heard Che Enjuan's call. He could only use his strength to roll over the finish line's small slope and obtain first place. Needless to say about the gaming black hole Lin Yongjian, Zhu Shimin, who had a good physique, made a big mistake. He kept spinning in the wrong direction. With great difficulty, Zhu Shimin could only catch up to Liu Yi and obtain third place. Che Enjuan hugged Kiki and cheered as he rushed towards Poplar Fruit. The two of them were full of love, making the Fujoshis in front of the TV excited. "Daddy, I want to play too." Chichi excitedly pulled her father's hand and jumped up and down as she looked at Lin Yongjian, who was still rolling on the ground. "Want to play? Don't worry, it's your turn now." Chapter 1431. For the last match, the atmosphere was unprecedentedly tense. Because this time, it was the last chance for the lagging Lin Yongjian and his son to fight for hope. One had to know that at the beginning, the village chief had announced the essence of the sports meets prize identity swapping. There were 4 rounds of competition, and each round would be based on the 1st to 5th place. The first place would get 5 points, and so on. The one with the highest total points would get to choose the identity of their favorite character first. This was also why Poplar Fruit and the rest, who usually did not pay much attention to winning, would give their all in the competition. Before this, Kiki's team had already gotten the full 10 points, while Xian Xian's team had also gotten a decent 7 points. Then, Kang Kang and Nuo Yi were tied with 5 points. The last place was the pitiful Da Jun, who had only gotten 3 points after 2 rounds. And among these 3 points, 1 point was given to him by little Zhong Wei, who had gotten Ning Jin to give it up. Hence, for this round of competition, everyone was holding back their energy, especially Da Jun. In order to escape the fate of being a beggar, he had to work hard to get a better score. If he could not get a good result, even if he got 5 points in the last round, he would not be able to catch up with the other kids. In comparison, Kiki's side was much more relaxed. Poplar Fruit wrapped his daughter in a blanket and watched her giggle. Poplar Fruit half-squatted, his posture perfect. With one hand holding the rope, he lifted Kiki up like a dumbbell. The feeling of being wrapped up in a blanket and riding the clouds was too good. Kiki was not afraid of falling. She could not stop giggling. If not for the competition, Kiki would have wanted her father to continue playing. With the village chief's command, the competition began. As soon as they came up, the children spun around as if their lives depended on it. Of course, it didn't take long for them to stop one after another as if their car had run out of gas. The spinning made their heads dizzy, and even Chichi was no exception. "Come on, Kiki, come on." Poplar Fruit and Che Enjuan were a little carried away as they rushed over to cheer Kiki on. At this time, Kiki was lying on her back. Her whole body was wrapped in the quilt, and only her small head was exposed. Her hair was spread out, and she was as cute as can be. Kiki set off once again, but on the other side, someone was lost. Xian Xian was even better than his father. As he flipped, he turned to the side. Zhu Shimin couldn't stand it anymore. She didn't care about her principle of not helping her son. She ran up to him and turned him over. In the end, there was no suspense. Kiki took first place. Of course, the price she paid was also very high. When the little girl sat up from the ground with great effort, Her hair was disheveled, and her face was covered in sweat. She looked funny and pitiful at the same time. The second place was Kang Kang. The older brother was indeed more determined than the younger brothers. Third place was Da Jun. Although this was not ideal, it was indeed their team's best result. Fourth place was Nuo Yi. The naive and sweet boy was spinning so fast that he almost crawled out of his blanket. The last place was, without any suspense, little fatty Shen. Although he persevered until the end, he was so tired that he wanted to curl up in his blanket and sleep. There was a change in the rankings. The first place was Kiki, with a total of 15 points. The second place was Kang Kang, with a good result of 9 points. The third place was Shen Shen, with 8 points. The fourth place was Nuo Yi, with 7 points. The fifth place was still behind Da Jun. However, Da Jun saw hope. They had obtained 6 points, and were only 3 points away from the second place. The last round of the competition was to eat the flatbread. There was a legendary story behind this flatbread. Poplar Fruit had heard of it when he was young. There was a lazy man whose wife was worried that he would starve to death. Hence, she made a huge flatbread for him and put it around his neck. This way, if he was hungry, he could eat it. When Poplar Fruit was telling this story, everyone could not help but look at Shen Shen, who had just put the flatbread around his neck. Little fatty Shen licked his lips and looked as though he could not resist eating it. The story continued. Unexpectedly, when the sluggard's wife returned home, the sluggard had already starved to death. He had only finished the biscuit in front of him, but he had starved to death. He didn't even bother to use his hands to move the biscuit that he couldn't reach with his mouth. However, in this round of the competition, everyone was not allowed to move the flatbread with their hands. They had to eat it with their mouths. The children ate the innermost circle, while the guests and their fathers ate the outer 2 circles. Whoever had the least amount of flatbread left in the allotted time would get first place. The gluttonous eating began. Kiki and Shen Shen's teams were still more well-behaved. Both teams ate diligently, especially Shen Shen, who ate with great vigor. As for the other teams, they ate until the flatbread crumbs flew everywhere. Gradually, they seemed to have discovered a loophole in the game. They began to intentionally or unintentionally drop some flatbread pieces on the ground and use their cushions to cover them. Of course, the program team would not let them get away with it. They chose Kang Kang, the little guy who had been playing the role of Bao Qingtian, and let him be the final judge. Kang Kang was a good judge who could see through everything. He quickly uncovered the trick under the cushions and gave a very fair ranking. For the first time, Poplar Fruit's team did not get first place. The first place went to Shen Shen's team, which had 2 men and a glutton. Shen Shen had made a fool of himself just now. The competition had already ended, yet he still wanted to eat the flatbread that his father had taken off his neck. Moreover, his desire to eat another bite was extremely strong. Zhu Shimin could not handle him at all. In the end, the cloak wrapped around Shen Shen's body to prevent the flatbread's grease from touching his clothes was torn apart by Zhu Shimin. Shen Shen was still desperately trying to crawl toward the meat bone like a puppy. Poplar Fruit did not get first place, but they still managed to get second place. Kiki did not eat much. She was smiling the whole time, but Poplar Fruit and Cheonjuan still gave it their all. Third place was Nuo Yi, and fifth place was Da Jun. These 2 teams were too cunning. They hid a lot of flatbread under the cushions. And fourth place was Kang Kang. There was no other way. Kang Kang was the judge. The upright little boy would not give himself a very high ranking. The final score was out. Kiki's 19 points were far in the lead. This lead could not be reversed long ago. Second place was Shen Shen with 12 points. Third place was Kang Kang with 11 points. Fourth place was Nuo Yi with 10 points. Last place was very sad. It was still Da Jun. No matter how many points he had, he did not want to reopen this scar. It was time to choose. Poplar Fruit was happy to find that he did not have to go back to prison. But what role should he change to? Poplar Fruit thought for a long time. In his mind, before the trip started, the conversation between himself and Kiki at home appeared. He smiled and waved his hand, saying, "My daughter really wants to be a princess. Then let's choose the emperor this time." It was as if it had been predestined. Before Poplar Fruit came, he had told his daughter that he would be the emperor and Kiki would be the princess. Although he had experienced the pain of being in prison, it seemed that the joke from before had come true. Chapter 1432. Poplar Fruit chose emperor. At this moment, Kiki still did not understand the meaning of this. She was just smiling happily because her father said that she was going to be a princess. As for Lin Yongjian and Da Jun, they looked gloomy. They had already been beggars for the entire morning. Were they going to continue suffering in the afternoon? At this moment, the second place Xian stood up. Zhu Shimin said righteously, "This morning, we became emperors and enjoyed the prosperity and wealth. Then let us be beggars in the afternoon." Through the afternoon exchange, Zhu Shimin suddenly realized that his role was purely about enjoyment. It was not as subversive as Lin Yongjian and Da Jun. He wanted to let himself and Xian experience such a complicated experience. Zhu Shimin's unexpected actions gave Lin Yongjian a glimmer of hope. However, Hu Jun and Liu Yi had disappointed them. The two of them did not want to change into Poplar Fruit's previous role and continue staying in prison. Hence, the third and fourth place decided to switch roles. Then, Lin Yongjian was only left with the identity of a prisoner. The production team did not torture Lin Yongjian. At this moment, the village chief jumped out and said with a smile, "As for Da Jun, because the prisoner role has no other plot, we have decided to arrange another role for you." What was this role? Empress. In other words, Lin Yongjian was going to play the role of Emperor Poplar Fruit's wife and play the role of Empress. Then, Da Jun would naturally become the emperor's child and inherit the role of crown prince left behind by Xian. This was going to be fun. Concubine Ning had welcomed her greatest enemy. She was going to play out a top-level unscripted palace fight scene with the cross-dressing Lin Yongjian. The camera panned around the corner of the garden. A group of servants and palace maids were surrounding a tall figure as they walked over. When the audience focused their eyes, they were all shocked. Damn, which corner of the world did this evil spirit pop out from? At this time, Lin Yongjian was wearing a gorgeous dress and an exquisite neon crown on his head. His face was smeared with a thick layer of powder, bright lipstick, eyeshadow, eyelashes, and his hair was combed until it was shiny. This appearance was enough to scare a child to tears. If he had to find an appropriate analogy, then he was like the snake spirit in the Calabash Brothers. He was simply a lunatic. What the audience didn't know was that when Lin Yongjian appeared on the stage after putting on makeup, all the staff in the audience burst out laughing. He made 1 NG. When Ning Jin appeared on the stage, Ning Jin burst out laughing again. He made a 2nd NG. After messing around a few times, everyone finally started to seriously record the show. Lin Yongjian was indeed a veteran actor. He had once played the role of the traitor to perfection. Now that he was playing the role of the Empress for the first time, he could actually play it very vividly. Her every movement and the look in her eyes made people's hearts beat wildly. It wasn't that he liked her, but that her yin qi was truly oppressive, making one's hair stand on end. Sure enough, he and Ning Jin were good friends. The two of them vividly acted out the catfight in the palace, and all kinds of lines that were out of the script jumped out crazily like a ping-pong ball. The audience was just disgusted by Lin Yongjian, but now they were watching with relish and laughing from time to time. Of course, they wouldn't let go of Poplar Fruit. Not long after, Poplar Fruit, who had just put on the Emperor's clothes and went out, was surrounded by 2 women who were about to fight. Lin Yongjian and Ning Jin insisted on Poplar Fruit judging who was better, him or her. That was the question. Poplar Fruit rarely liked acting. He took advantage of the Emperor's majesty and made his Empress and beloved concubine tremble and stand on the side. "Is it that you can't be friends anymore?" Poplar Fruit's voice became very deep. At first glance, it was obvious that he learned from Huang Amma in Huanzhou. "Yes, today, either she dies or I live." Lin Yongjian gnashed his teeth and said. That orchid gesture made Poplar Fruit have goosebumps. "You die, I live." Of course, Imperial concubine Ning found the hidden meaning in the other's words and disdainfully said. Saying this, the two of them looked at each other, then snorted and turned their heads to look to the side. This acting, there was really nothing to say. Cough, cough, since you two are like fire and water, then I will make a choice. It's time to make a choice, Yang Guo said in an exaggerated tone. Emperor, choose me, choose me. Lin Yongjian and Ning Jin both pretended to be charming or pitiful and shouted. Shut up. Poplar Fruit waved his hand majestically, immediately frightening the two of them into silence. Poplar Fruit nodded with satisfaction. He continued to act and said, Yuan, today, we have reached this point. Then I will decide. Seeing the two of them nervous, Poplar Fruit smiled and said, if I choose Imperial Concubine Ning. He deliberately paused, making Ning Jin's eyes shine with excitement. But Poplar Fruit quickly poured a basin of cold water on them. You are so beautiful, when I go home, it will be very, very troublesome. So, I still choose to let my empress stay. Poplar Fruit waved his sleeves, not giving Ning Jin time to cry. Come, take Imperial Concubine Ning to prison and choose a day to behead her. This was simply heaven and earth turning treatment. The audience held back their laughter and saw Ning Jin being taken away by Cheonjuan and then locked in prison. But this was probably the most ridiculous reason in history for abandoning someone, and also the most speechless and helpless reason for failure in the history of palace intrigue. The program team did let Poplar Fruit give up Ning Jin and choose Lin Yongjian. This was the outline of the script, and the specific details were up to Poplar Fruit and the others. As a result, Poplar Fruit actually came up with such a reason, the audience couldn't laugh anymore. Thinking that you are beautiful, it will be difficult to explain when you go home, so you choose him and not you. How can Imperial Concubine Ning defend herself? She wanted to work hard. Imperial Concubine Ning's defeat also means the Empress's victory, but Lin Yongjian's small eyes narrowed with a smile. Why does it feel like a villain counterattacking? Well, the farce is over, and Lin Yongjian's snake-like face can finally disappear from everyone's sight for a while. Poplar Fruit, wearing a yellow robe, came to his palace. He was going to find his two children. In the magnificent palace, Kiki and Xian Xian have also changed into exquisite clothes. The little girl was generous, and she smiled sweetly in front of her father, as if a real princess had returned. Yang Guo gave her daughter a thumbs up and said with a smile, that's what a princess of China should be like. In the past, when she wore a princess dress, she was more beautiful, but relatively speaking, that one was more modern, like a commoner princess. How could she have the feeling of a real royal daughter now? Chapter 1433. It was rare for Da Jun to become the crown prince, but he did not show the look of a crown prince. Xian Xian, on the other hand, was unrestrained due to his confusion. He felt that everything was restricted. Especially when he saw the majestic Poplar Fruit Empress Ama. Luckily, Poplar Fruit and Kiki's complicated conversation about his father is my wife dispelled Da Jun's nervousness. He felt that Uncle Poplar Fruit had only changed into a dragon robe. In fact, it was still the same Uncle Poplar Fruit that he was familiar with. It was still the original recipe, and it was still the familiar smell. According to the script, the two children were to go to the Imperial College to study Chinese studies. However, as Poplar Fruit had nothing to do and liked to teach others, he excitedly applied for him to be the children's teacher. However, the teaching this time did not cause a stir. This was because Poplar Fruit did not touch on any profound content. He was just teaching the children to read the three-character classic. Man at birth is good by nature. This was indeed a bit of a waste of talent, but Poplar Fruit still enjoyed it. The Chinese department's PhD recited these ancient books that were full of wisdom. The ups and downs were very clear. It was as pleasant to listen to as a song. Just like that, the afternoon passed by peacefully. When it was dinner time, Poplar Fruit issued a general amnesty. The pitiful concubine Ning could finally be released from prison. As for the other fathers and sons who had experienced solving cases and leading the army, as well as begging, they all returned to the palace. It was rare for the program team to show mercy. The father and the children finally did not have to suffer any torment. They could comfortably enjoy the palace banquet provided by the program team. Needless to say, the meal was very sumptuous. It was as if the sumptuous fake Manchu Han imperial feast in the afternoon had become real. At night, after sending off the guests, the father and the children's role-play had not ended. General Hu brought Kang Kang to the general's mansion. Liu Yi and Nuo Yi stayed in the Yaman's backyard. Zhu Shimin and Shen Xian also stayed in their exclusive beggar's house. Of course, the beggar's house only looked a little shabby. The actual effect of staying in it was not bad. It was not worse than an express hotel. Of course, the most comfortable ones were Poplar Fruit and Lin Yongjian's families. Lin Yongjian removed his makeup and moved into the comfortable side palace with Da Jun. Teacher Lin was still nagging at Da Jun about the principles of life. There will always be ups and downs in life. You see, we were wandering the streets in the morning, and now we can live in such a luxurious palace, right? When you were dressed like that in the morning and were surrounded by people, did you feel uncomfortable? I don't think, Daddy. Lin Yongjian's preaching was quite annoying. In the previous few episodes, Da Jun had repeatedly shown resistance, but he had not learned his lesson. But today, Da Jun didn't show any annoyance. He just used a sentence to shut his father's mouth. I think I'm very happy to be with my father. Lin Yongjian looked at his son with gratification and didn't want to say anything more. He was quite happy now, wasn't he? The camera panned to an even more luxurious palace, where the emperor lived. This episode of Where Are We Going, Daddy, really put in a lot of effort. Although it was a replica of a palace, there were probably not many people in China who could live in it and lie on a large bed made of yellow satin. Poplar Fruit and Kiki seemed to have become the biggest winners. Poplar Fruit sat by the bed, beaming as he watched his daughter's performance in front of him. In order to save her father in the morning, Kiki had learned a lot of palace etiquette from Ning Jin. Those things were useless, but after her father asked, the little girl excitedly performed for him. Poplar Fruit's smile wasn't a smile of appreciation like the audience's, but a smile of happiness that was difficult to describe with words. He wasn't watching Kiki's cute and elegant etiquette performance, but Kiki's efforts to save her father after she was imprisoned. To be able to live in a palace, Kiki was still very happy. After watching Frozen, the little girl had always hoped that she could be like the princess in the animated movie and have a super beautiful castle. Although the palace now had a cultural difference with the castle, in the little girl's eyes, it wasn't worse than the cold castle. Chichi felt that she was even more like a princess now that she was living in this dazzling palace. However, when she was chattering with her father about her happy mood, the little girl's hair was loose. She didn't pay much attention to her image before sleeping. Except for her delicate and moist little face, Kiki didn't look like a little princess at all. Before we came, Daddy didn't lie to you, right? Poplar Fruit smiled as he lay on the bed, looking at his daughter who was sitting on the big bed and gesturing. He said, "You're like Little Swallow. In the end, you can still become a real princess." The process was very important, but at this time, there was no need to have a summary meeting like Lin Yongjian. It was fine as long as she was happy. Hehe, so I really became a princess? Kiki pinched her sleeves and asked with some embarrassment and anticipation. Of course. Tonight, you're a princess. Poplar Fruit laughed. However, the princesses of the Great Qing dynasty weren't called princesses, they were called Gij. I know. Little Swallow is called Huanzhu Gij. Ziwei is called Gij Mingzhu. Kiki said happily. Then what's your name? Poplar Fruit teased his daughter and asked. I'm called Kiki Gij. Before she finished speaking, the little girl who loved to laugh started giggling. It was as if every word she said to her father contained something that made her happy. Needless to say, laughter was contagious. Looking at the little girl's beautiful smile, the audience couldn't help but laugh. Poplar Fruit continued to tease his daughter. Hey! You're saying that your name is Kiki Gij Ge? He seriously changed the tone of Kiki's laughter just now, making it sound as if Kiki really made a slip of the tongue. No, there aren't that many spaces. Poplar Fruit's mischief wasn't the funniest part. Kiki's serious explanation to her father was the reason why the audience couldn't help but feel angry and amused at the same time. There are only 2 spaces. Innocent little princess. How could you be so easily fooled? And Poplar Fruit. You're too bad. Such a cute little girl, Yet you still have the heart to bully her. Oh. Is it Kiki Gidge? Poplar Fruit said. Yes, Kiki Gidge, repeat after me. Kiki Gidge. Kiki happily moved her little butt and excitedly became a language teacher. Like father, like daughter, our Kiki Gidge was also a person who liked to teach others. Kiki Gidge, Kiki Gidge, Poplar Fruit smilingly repeated after his daughter's somewhat childish voice. Nowadays, many celebrities doted on Kiki in the name of love. There was a news article that said so. Sometimes, Poplar Fruit's love for Kiki had indeed reached the level of doting, just like now. However, had Poplar Fruit really always doted on Kiki? Of course not. If there was a chance for her to try and face setbacks and pain within an acceptable range, Poplar Fruit wouldn't hesitate at all. For example, tomorrow. Chapter 1434. For the whole day, you can't be with your father. The village chief's words broke the joyous atmosphere of the morning. Suddenly, all the children became nervous. Ah! No, I want to be with my daddy. Kiki was the same as the other children. Her first reaction was to turn around and hug her father tightly. Then, she pouted her mouth. The village chief saw that the situation was not good and quickly explained, "It's like this. Every child has to go with another father to complete your task today. Of course, after completing the task, you can still see your father, but if you can't complete it, then you can't change back." The village chief added a little tension to the children in the end. So you have to work hard to complete the task. Poplar Fruit patted his daughter's shoulder and smiled. After completing the task, won't you be able to see your father? Moreover, you're already so familiar with these fathers. What are you afraid of? That's right. They have been through so many journeys together. These fathers of her good friends are actually super good people. Kiki understood and immediately turned from gloomy to sunny. She jumped up and down as she waited for the village chief to announce her group. Da Jun and Uncle Liu Yi. Liu Yi rubbed his hands together, but Da Jun was a little gloomy. Xian Xian and Uncle Lin Yongjian. This combination was a little interesting. The muddle-headed little foodie met a serious father. Kiki. Before the village chief could say anything, Kiki secretly smiled and pointed at Hu Jun. This scene was pointed out by the village chief, causing everyone to laugh out loud. It seemed that the honest and steady Hu Jun was really liked by the children, especially the girls. Moreover, Hu Jun had a daughter who was already in her teens. He was very experienced in raising and taking care of his daughter. It was much better than raising a boy. Kang Kang was deeply resentful. However, the village chief did not do as she wished and announced, "Kiki and Uncle Zhu Shimin are in a group." However, this was not bad. She was more familiar with Xian Xian's father, and Zhu Shimin had a good relationship with Poplar Fruit. When they were in Cai Yun, after the fireworks, the two families had a meal together. Kiki had even directed a short drama. Zhu Shimin, who had given birth to two boys, was actually looking forward to having a daughter. In fact, he usually took good care of Kiki, so when he heard that he was in the same group as Kiki, Zhu Shimin raised his arms and shouted. Under Lin Yongjian's envious gaze, Zhu Shimin smiled and lifted Kiki up high. This was probably what he wanted to do to his future daughter. Raise little fatty Xian. Little fatty Xian was too heavy. Moreover, this little foodie didn't feel any joy when lifting it up. Next up would be Nuo Yi, and Hu Jun Kang Kang would be in the same group as Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit scratched his head at the thought of being with Kang Kang. If it were other children, it would be better. For example, Xian Xian and Nuo Yi. Poplar Fruit felt that he could control it. Kang Kang was older and had her own thoughts. She was usually cold and aloof. Poplar Fruit didn't know if he could communicate well with Kang Kang. This was definitely not a small challenge. After receiving the mission card, Poplar Fruit looked at the mission card and patted Kang Kang's shoulder. "Come, Kang Kang, do you want to read it?" Kang Kang was silent. "It's really not easy to deal with." Poplar Fruit scratched his head. He was a little conflicted. He touched his chin and could only read it himself. Sing in a crowded place. Sing in a crowded place. Let Kang Kang. Why was Kang Kang cold and aloof? It was because he didn't fit in. Let a boy who didn't like to be in the limelight sing in a crowded place. He might even embarrass himself. Wouldn't that kill him? Not to mention Kang, even Poplar Fruit felt that it would be difficult for him to sing in a crowded place. The main thing was that he would be out of tune when he sang. What should he do? After separating from his daughter, Poplar Fruit brought Kang along. However, at the Yamen, Poplar Fruit was worried. He didn't expect Kang to be very excited to follow him, but at least she shouldn't be as cold as she was now. He asked him what song to sing, but Kang didn't say a word. After asking a few questions, he sighed and turned to walk to the side. Seeing how indifferent Director Kang was, Poplar Fruit scratched his head. Do you miss your father? Poplar Fruit thought of a possibility. As soon as he said that, Poplar Fruit saw that Kang's eyes were starting to turn red. He guessed right. Kang really did miss her father. In other words, she wanted to be with her father now, not with Poplar Fruit. Unlike Poplar Fruit and Kiki, who Jun and Kang didn't spend much time together. It was a rare opportunity to travel with their father, but now it turned out to be with someone else's father. His father, on the other hand, looked very happy as he left with the other children. Poplar Fruit guessed that his daughter wouldn't be like Kang, because Kiki knew that leaving her father's side was only temporary. Just like at the earthen building in Minute Province, her father would still return to her side at night. Moreover, Kiki was usually with her father, so she wouldn't be as reluctant to leave as Kang. After figuring out the origin of Kang's emotions, Poplar Fruit sat next to Kang for a while, but he didn't try to comfort Kang. Kang, who had her own thoughts, wouldn't be so easily comforted, unless she was as gentle and understanding as the assistant. Poplar Fruit didn't think he had that charm. The two of them didn't look at each other and just sat there for a while. The staff members who were following them were a little anxious, thinking that the two of them had reached a dead end and were about to come up with a plan. At that moment, Poplar Fruit patted Kang's shoulder and stood up. He smiled and said, "Wait for me here." After that, Poplar Fruit walked out. At that moment, no matter how cold Director Kang was, he couldn't be cold anymore. He was very curious. He raised his head and didn't move, but his eyes followed. Poplar Fruit walked out and discussed something with a group of staff members. He even gestured with his hands, looking like he was about to make a big scene. The assistant director that Poplar Fruit was facing was a little troubled, but after pondering for a while, he nodded. What are you trying to do? If there was a voiceover, it would definitely be able to explain Kang's thoughts at that moment. Seeing that Poplar Fruit had returned, the young man curled his lips in disdain, but the expression in his eyes betrayed him. He actually wanted to know what Poplar Fruit had done just now. Let's go. Since we can't finish the mission now, I'll take you to see something. Poplar Fruit smiled at Kang and gestured for him to follow him. Kang hesitated for a while, but still stood up and followed him with a blank expression. What was it to see? Chapter 1435. Poplar Fruit led Kang to a mysterious house, and the show came to an end. The camera panned to Kiki, who was leaving with Xuanxuan's father. They had received a mission card earlier, and the requirement was for Kiki to learn boxing from Zhu Shimin. She had to defeat Xianxian, who had been trained by Zhu Shimin since young. There was no doubt that Xuanxuan's small fists were powerful. In the past few episodes, clips of Xianxian practicing boxing with his father were widely known. Although he was the youngest and the shortest, he was very skilled in boxing. Moreover, he had a tenacity that refused to admit defeat. It would not be easy for Kiki, who was a girl, to defeat Xianxian. Uncle will teach you boxing later, okay? Zhu Shimin walked on the road, both his hands clenched into fists. One of his hands was still holding the mission card in a fist position. He made a left and right hook pose, and his fists were strong and vigorous. I know how to do it too. My daddy taught me the Ben fist. The little girl bent her legs and bent her waist, and made a tight martial arts posture. She was not well prepared, and it gave people a feeling of cuteness. Zhu Shimin looked at Kiki and liked it very much. He smiled and said, "There's a big difference between martial arts and boxing. Do you want to try boxing?" Okay. I like boxing too. Shishi giggled. In truth, the little girl did not know much about the concept of boxing, but she still had an eager expression on her face. When they arrived at the boxing gym, Kiki looked around curiously, including the lonely boxing ring in the middle. It was the first time Kiki had seen such a place. Come up. Zhu Shimin climbed up first, lifted the rope of the fence, and reached out to pull the little girl up. Is this for singing? Kiki asked whimsically. I've seen it on TV before. She was referring to the PK segment of China's Top Voice. However, she did not mention the name of the program. She reckoned that it would be edited out even if she did. No, this is the boxing ring. We will train here today. Zhu Shimin explained some simple rules of the boxing ring to Kiki. It's okay if you don't remember. I'll tell you when we meet later. Chichi nodded her head in confusion. She had actually remembered everything, but she was very mechanical and did not understand it. Before boxing practice, Zhu Shimin took Kiki to do some warm-up exercises. Kiki's personality was really good. Firstly, she would not lose her temper casually. Secondly, she would not inexplicably fall into her own little emotions. Thirdly, she would find these exercises, which were not very attractive, troublesome. The little girl kept giggling, causing the already bright boxing gym to be filled with bright sunshine. Jumping and jumping, kicking and waving, it was as if a beautiful dandelion was fluttering in the wind. Zhu Shimin also had a good time teaching Kiki. It was impeccable, okay? The little girl had been working very hard to complete the warm-up exercises he taught. Not only was she very sensible, but her movements were also very close to the standard. After all, Chichi was only 4 years old. The little girl was even more sensible than the 7-year-old Kang. How surprising and likable was this performance. The smile on Zhu Shimin's face did not stop. The crow's feet at the corner of his eyes were about to bloom, but he did not have any scruples. When teaching Kiki boxing, Zhu Shimin had the illusion that he was teaching his own daughter. Suddenly, Zhu Shimin was intoxicated by the pride that arose spontaneously from the excellence of his own children. Why was the second child a son? It was not that he did not like his youngest son, Hao, but at this moment, he suddenly felt that having a daughter was a very fortunate thing. When you punch here, don't stand still. Look at me, follow this leg and watch again. Zhu Shimin taught her step by step. Chichi was a quick learner. She only needed Zhu Shimin to teach her a lot of simple actions once, and she would be able to do the more complicated ones after Zhu Shimin had demonstrated them twice. Very good. Very good. Zhu Shimin smiled from ear to ear. In fact, at this time, Zhu Shimin was not only smiling because he liked the little girl, but also because he loved her talent. Not to mention the various spiritual requirements behind boxing, such as perseverance, strength, aggressiveness, and so on. Just from the technical level, Kiki's talent was the best Zhu Shimin had ever seen. Xianxian had been boxing since she was a child. She had watched her father compete since she was a child, and she had already practiced with her father since she was a child. When she waved her fleshy little fists, even Fan Shaohuang had to retreat. However, Kiki's learning effect in one morning had already reached 50 to 60% of Xianxian's. Putting aside his age, his learning speed was simply too astonishing. This was a relatively general learning step by step. In the future, with diligent training, Kiki could string these skills together and not be much worse than Xianxian. Zhu Shimin even felt that when he started boxing at the age of 16, he did not learn as fast as Kiki. If Kiki had a foundation in martial arts, then Zhu Shimin had it too. Before he started boxing, he also practiced martial arts for 2 years. Why wasn't he as good as Kiki? It could only be said that the talent of the poplar fruit that Kiki inherited was too dazzling, and there were many things that made people envious. For example, Kiki's height. She was only 4 years old, but she was almost the same height as the 7-year-old Kang. Zhu Shimin could only look at her and sigh. He was only 1.62 meters tall. The genetic gap between him and the poplar fruit's 1.88 meters was too big. For example, Kiki's appearance was inherited from her mother's genes. Although she still had single eyelids and small eyes, her overall appearance was not too bad. But compared to Kiki, The difference in the genetic influence of the poplar fruit was obvious. Poplar fruit's appearance was undeniably handsome, and it was compatible with both Eastern and Western aesthetic standards. Kiki was the same. She was already mature at the age of 4. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that she was a beauty. Speaking of which, Kiki looked very similar to the fairy sister Liu Yifei when she was young. They were both lively and cute little beauties. Of course, there were still people who paid attention to Kiki's education on the internet. Poplar Fruit's family was born in a farmer's family. It was not considered a scholarly family, but Poplar Fruit's double doctorate, future university professor status, and Fong Beibei's master's degree meant that Kiki's environment was not inferior to that of a scholarly family. Everyone had seen Kiki's French before, but they were not surprised. Her father was a master of languages. How bad could the child be? Well, what was strange was that Zhu Shimin did not feel jealous or frustrated. Instead, he felt gratified and happy, just like when he taught Xian Xian. Chapter 1436. The door was pushed open. It was actually a conference room in the film city. Soon, some staff members came in with laptops, cameras, and other equipment. Poplar Fruit wasn't going to explain anything, and Kang wasn't very afraid in this unfamiliar environment. He first stood silently beside Poplar Fruit for a while, then couldn't hold back his curiosity and looked over. Seeing this, the corners of Yang Guo's mouth curled up slightly. He gently patted Kang's shoulder and then put him on the ground. The two of them stood side by side like brothers. "Do you know what they are doing?" Poplar Fruit asked. "Assembling the computer." Mr. Kang thought that he was experienced and knowledgeable, so how could he be stumped by such a small problem? However, because of this competitive attitude, he wasn't as cold as before, and Poplar Fruit naturally put his hand on his shoulder. "And then?" Poplar Fruit asked patiently. Mr. Kang finally shook his head. "There was a song that said, 'When the corners of your mouth are down, it's beautiful, just like the clear water under Anhe Bridge.'" However, Mr. Kang wasn't Miss Dong. Although the corners of his mouth were naturally down, the distance was always subtly proportional to the downward curve. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Come on, I'll show you." After that, Poplar Fruit rolled up his sleeves, and his attitude was very serious, just like how he usually was in class. In the interlude interview, Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Actually, I know that Kang is a little different from other children. He has his own thoughts and personality. This is a good thing, because such a child has a very strong sense of justice. But because of this personality, it's not easy for him to accept me as his temporary father. So, I decided to find another way, instead of coaxing him like a child." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Treat him as an equal, and find something that resonates with him." Poplar Fruit walked to the front of the computer, fumbled around a little, and switched the projection mode. The small screen of the computer was projected on the screen in the conference room. Although it was not as clear, it was not in front of the computer, which made it easier for the cameraman to take pictures. Poplar Fruit skillfully typed a line of internet address in the address bar. Although this computer didn't have his own bookmark, Poplar Fruit had already memorized it by heart, so he didn't need to use a search engine. Poplar Fruit introduced it and said, "This is the website entrance of the online remote teaching platform that I created with many caring students from all over the country." Remote teaching was no longer Poplar Fruit's personal backyard. In fact, for the better development of the charity organization, Poplar Fruit had completely withdrawn from the management team. He only retained the title of honorary chairman under everyone's pleas. The remote teaching organization was managed democratically by representatives selected by various universities. Instead, it displayed even more outstanding result. First of all, the progress of the platform. In the past, the framework of this platform was set up by Fat Dragon's company, but it was not perfect enough, and there were many loopholes and inadequacies in the experience. Now, many experts were selected from many universities in the country to redo the framework, and professional design students helped to design the UI. All of this labor was free and voluntary. Poplar Fruit heard such a story at the time. It was a class of students at Shuremu University who pulled the teacher into it. They patted their chest and said, "We don't charge if we don't do well, and we don't charge if we do well. Let's just treat it as after-class practice. After many adjustments, the current remote teaching system was not worse than the software of large companies. They even developed a mobile app. It allowed some volunteers to mark children's homework and answer questions through mobile phones or tablet. Of course, in addition to the system upgrade, a more scientific and intelligent volunteer service mechanism was also developed by this group of lovely Chinese university students. Through the division of regional responsibility, they let different universities be more responsible for children in different poor areas. Through the mathematical modeling of the School of Mathematics, the division of labor and time arrangement of volunteers were more reasonable. This allowed volunteers to enter their free time into the system and get a detailed schedule for the next week. It would not squeeze the energy of the volunteers. Instead, through more scientific allocation, it allowed the entire large group of volunteers to operate efficiently. It reduced the effort of manpower, improved efficiency, and reasonably planned resources. Needless to say, this intelligent volunteer scheduling system had won a very dazzling award in the Communist Party Central Committee this year. Many volunteer teams from both domestic and foreign countries came to learn from their experience. In addition to the above two, there was also an inconspicuous improvement, which was the expansion of the Remote Teaching Charity Fund. In the past, the charity fund was supported by Poplar Fruit alone, but from this year onwards, there had been a change. The management team of the charity fund was originally promoted by Poplar Fruit, Wang Yubo and Lin Xingshan, but Wang Yubo decided to expand the team and fully fit in with the remote teaching management team. While retaining the marketization and standardization of the fund, it increased the foundation of the masses and a more comprehensive supervision mechanism. Needless to say, the charity donations received by the foundation were several times more than before. Although Poplar Fruit was still at the top with more than 300 million donations, this year, Poplar Fruit's donations no longer accounted for the majority. The resourceful university students pulled in a lot of donations from many well-known people in society. Not long ago, Wang Yubo ambitiously said to Poplar Fruit that at this rate of growth, by the middle of next year, they could consider upgrading the remote teaching equipment for the students in poor areas in the country. The equipment now was the standard 2 years ago, and it was much worse than the average computer. When Poplar Fruit explained the remote teaching to Kang, he went a little too far. He almost talked about the history and development of remote teaching. Although Kang was fascinated by it, the program crew cut straight to the point, leaving only the beginning and the end. After entering the remote teaching platform, Poplar Fruit took advantage of the break time of the children in Xiong village to take over the video control of a class. As a result, the moment the news came out, all the children in the school squeezed into this class. 3 years passed in a flash. Now, among the children in Xiong village, many of the old faces had disappeared. Children like Xiong Xiaofeng and Xiong Anshiren had graduated from primary school and entered the county's junior high school to continue their studies. The little ones who were still naked in the beginning had now become senior students. What had changed was their appearance, and more importantly, their spirit and appearance. Looking at the crowd coming over one by one with hopeful smiles, Poplar Fruit felt as if a lifetime had passed. For Kang, this was a huge shock. He had seen some photos on the website when Poplar Fruit was introducing it. There were old photos of Xiong village there. The difference was huge. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.